Meeting will now come to order. Everybody, welcome to the February 22nd, 2017 Planning Board meeting. We're going to start with a silent moment of prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first order of business tonight, we have the minutes from January 25th. Yes, I'll do that. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided, indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of Public Laws of 1975, by advertising a notion in the Star Gazette and Express Times, and by posting a copy of the bulletin board in the municipal building. And we'll do the roll call.
Members Fitzsimmons?
Yes, here.
Fox?
Here.
Pryor?
Here.
Schneider? Here. Wolf?
Here.
Mayor McKay?
Here.
Vice Chairman Chesky?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
Alternate Fishback?
Here.
Okay, moving on to old business with the approval of the minutes for January 25th, 2017.
Yeah, I have a question if I could, before we do that. I noticed Ms. Schneider left a couple times during the last meeting during testimony.
I left one.
And then you left early, correct? You left briefly and left early?
I left, and I left for good. And that was already approved by the chair and
Yes.
vice chair.
It doesn't matter if you miss testimony, you have to submit written certification that you've reviewed the tape.
Okay.
Okay,
Before she can vote.
Yes, absolutely. And so we could do that moving forward, of course. And I knew you were leaving and you had a prior engagement. And
What
so
if we
did the
vote
vice chair.
on Ferrugia today? She cannot vote.
I'll ask the attorney if that's applicable in this case.
It is, unless someone has heard all the testimony, they're not qualified to vote. They listen to the tape and certify to it. They are qualified, but if this comes to a vote this evening, she would not, under the statute, be qualified to vote. And it doesn't matter if she's excused or not excused. You're either present and heard the testimony, or you listen to the tape, or you're not. It's one of the It's not something that is within the discretion of the chair. It's a requirement of the statute.
Right, and I believe you left at 9:45.
Yeah, 9:42 and the meeting was over.
Right, Zeb. So, I mean, I know you missed the comment at the end. Does anybody know how long the testimony went to on that one?
You know, may I point out, when you are hearing testimony, you're sitting as quasi-judicial body. It's just like if you were in a jury box, you couldn't come and go. You couldn't, if you were the judge, you couldn't come and go. And who can determine whether one piece of testimony is essential or not? That's why the law is the law, so.
Yep. So check out the tape. And I don't think you left any testimony, but I know you left before comments. But that's okay. We're not going to make a big federal case about this. We'll just look at the case or look at the tape when you can. So we're going to move on then to the minutes for the approval. Any comments on that? The one comment I would like to say is just remove the unannounced from Mrs. Schneider leaving. I was aware of it as well as Peter was too. And,
I was.
again, it was known, so just take out the word unannounced and we'll move forward.
Somebody has to vote that in.
So that's my...
If she left unannounced, she didn't announce she was leaving. She should just remain there.
I would make a motion to remove the word unannounced. It sounds like
I second that.
Prior notice.
That should have been on record.
Again, you are a quasi-judicial body, and the record is important.
So a motion's been made, a motion's been seconded.
That's right.
So roll call for the immediate...
Members Fitzsimmons?
Yes.
Fox?
Yes.
Pryor,
No.
Schneider,
You have to abstain tonight?
yeah. Well,
I'm going to abstain because I don't know what part of the meeting minutes you might have missed, Don.
Mayor McKay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Chesky,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson,
Yes. So move to coordinated health is the next item. I
we have to
think,
approve the minutes.
I believe we just did, right?
No, all you did was make a motion to take out the word unannounced.
Okay, then we'll go through then, I figured it was a 2-in-1 shot. All right, let's then do the roll call for approving the minutes.
I need a motion in a second.
Motion.
Second.
Okay, you make that vote.
Yes.
Members Simmons,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Pryor,
No.
Schneider,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Mayor McKay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Chesky,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson,
Yes.
alternate Fishback.
Yes.
Okay, next item is coordinated health. I think we're looking for, you're here, okay.
Yes. I'm here on all three matters tonight. I have Mr. Peck from my office who's not available. My name is Don Souders. I'm an attorney with the Florio Prucci Steinhardt Fader Law Firm here in Phillipsburg. Good evening, everybody. This first matter, as I understand, it's a request that was presented to the board by our firm on behalf of Coordinated Health, asking the board to authorize your engineer, Mr. Sturbins, to relax the sole remaining condition of approval on this phase of Coordinated Health's approval on this medical facility. And that condition relates to Warren County Planning Board approval. My understanding is that the issue is on the board's agenda, the County Planning Board agenda for February 27th. It is anticipated, but in no way predictable, that we will get our approval there. But I think we succeeded in at least initially convincing Mr. Sturbins that it's highly likely, given the fact that we're not on a county road and there's no facilities within the county jurisdiction that are going to be impacted in any project. We would be asking to give authority to have the engineer work with us to begin construction of the next phase with the relaxation of this condition. The anticipation it would be out of risk, and we're not asking to waive the condition, but just allow us to proceed now as opposed to later. Should it be delayed further at the end of the month?
When did you want to start construction?
As soon as possible, as I understand it.
Just to give the board the background, there was an approval in this particular matter. There were a series of conditions that had to be addressed by the applicant. Recently, we're very close to satisfying all the conditions. I conducted the pre-construction meeting. I indicated to the applicant that there were several outstanding conditions from the approval that had to be addressed. One of them was the county planning board approval. The applicant, since that time, and I think that was a February 3rd meeting, has addressed the bonding and inspection fees and gotten the plans fully approved at this point. This is the remaining condition. So I've been I haven't allowed them to go to construction because there's a condition in resolution. So the question is, are you willing to set that aside and allow me administratively to allow them as township engineer to go to construction? We do have a hearing scheduled before the planning board in Warren County on the 27th. It is very low risk. You know, I looked at the comments from the first phase of this project, and there was no actually there was only 2 comments that were given by the county planning board on the previous phase of the job, which is now constructed. So I don't expect any substantive comments. This project is not located on a county road. It's not affecting any county facilities. So it's and there is a check here if they don't go and get this approval and they go into construction and have the building ready for a CO, they're not going to get a CO. So because they need to get the county approval. So the question is, do you want to work with this applicant and allow them to go to construction at this point without the county approval? This seems to be on the verge of being issued, but we don't know. We don't have a crystal ball here. Or do you want to hold the line in the resolution and not allow me to allow them to go to construction at this point until they actually have an unconditional county planning board approval? So that's why Mr. Souders is here tonight to talk to you about this.
And I acknowledge on behalf of Coordinated Health the fact that you hold that hammer over our head respectfully to see it. You know that that's the ultimate authority of the township to keep us from opening. So
And any conditions of the approval would be known in 5 days. Obviously, we would move forward.
County approval, sure.
Yes, the county approval. Any conditions of the county
Assuming they
approval, we would know.
hear the meeting and were heard, and there's a decision made at that meeting.
The only condition I had the last time was they wanted verification that the Township of Lopatcong had approved the drainage design and had provided a means for the stormwater management improvements to be maintained, which they did, and I ended up writing a letter. So I'm anticipating that there'll be a similar comment or condition in the county approval, and I'll turn around and write a letter to the county planning board indicating that we did approve the stormwater management design and that there is a means in that approval for maintaining the stormwater management improvements.
Okay, and you're comfortable with this proceeding this way?
I'm comfortable. If this was on a county road, I don't even think I would have recommended to Mr. Souders that he be here tonight, because there could be more substantive issues. It would take a longer amount of time. This, again, is very low risk. It's not on a county road. It doesn't affect the county facility. It's on the same site that already had a review, and there's very few review comments. So I think it's very low risk, and the advantage here, we could let this applicant go to construction on the job. Everything else is in place at this point to do that.
And legally, we're in authority to be able to grant such a waiver?
The applicant acknowledging that they're taking the risk based upon the recommendation of our engineer.
Okay.
Tony, I have just one question. I'm not sure whether at their risk is a legal term of art, if that's sufficient. Would we have to be held harmless and indemnified? Or I'll leave the language up to you, or is it their risk sufficient?
I'll draft a resolution that contains the appropriate language if that is.
And that's good for me.
So, is there any other comments by the board members or questions?
I would just like to know, what is the rush? We're talking about 4 weeks, right?
They want to get moving. This is behind schedule for them as it is, so
But we're talking about 4 weeks, right?
potentially, but if the board, for whatever reason, doesn't have a quorum or doesn't convene or they don't get to our agenda item or fact, for whatever unexpected reason, they may table it to the next meeting. It's not X number of days. It's another 30 days on top of that, so.
I'd also point out, in fairness to the applicant, that they're here at the suggestion of our engineer. It's not stuff. They marched in, pounded their fist, and demanding that this happen. It was at our professional's recommendation. I don't think he would have done so if he was uncomfortable with it.
I think the advantage here, Peter, is that if they start now, obviously the weather isn't that great now, but the lion's share of the work will be taking place during very favorable weather conditions, which would allow this project to be done by Labor Day. That's their goal. It's a 6-month project. And that would produce a nice rateable for the township, ultimately. So I think that's the advantage. They would catch the weather at the right time for this job. If it drags on, then we may have this project taking place in the fall, the latter part of the fall, and things aren't as favorable at that time for getting things done.
Peter, I said he wanted to start tomorrow because they moved the construction trailer in last week, and there's a track backhoe sitting on the site tonight.
If we saw it, I wasn't aware of that, but I know that.
I know
How soon do they want to begin construction? 5 days, you said?
That's my understanding. I was told as soon as possible. I spoke to one of the principals tonight on the phone, so.
Okay, so I think that what we're looking for is somebody, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think we're looking for a motion with the appropriate paperwork signed that you're taking on, the risk, or however Anthony wants to word it.
Well, I think
that would be, that's the condition of the...
I'm acknowledging on the record that we're proceeding at risk, and the risk ultimately is that the CO is not going to be issued if we don't meet the condition, which means we're going to have to build a facility at significant expense that we can't use. So that's the practical at-risk part of it, and I think Anthony would likely memorialize that in a resolution.
I'll prepare a resolution if that's what's pleasure. We need a motion at this point.
Right, so I'm looking for a motion?
Yes. I make that motion. To approve start construction based on professionals' wording and supervision, whatever it is.
Okay.
And authority to our engineer to work with the applicant to begin construction without county planning board.
Yes, right, at their risk.
I knew that.
Yes, yeah, so I'm looking for a second on that motion.
I will second that.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call then.
Mr. Simmons,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Schneider. Yes. Wolf,
Yes.
Mayor McKay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Chesky.
Yes.
Chairman Hunt.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And you are here with Sycamore Landing as well?
I am. The applicant, I guess, is technically Peron, JSM LLC. I'm here with our engineer, Mr. Allenbach, and Rob DeBeer, one of the principals and representatives of Sycamore Landing. And I'm going to ask our engineer to approach, if that's appropriate, and provide a summary of where we stand with respect to this loop road connection between the project and the mall, because he's more familiar with the history of it certainly than I am, and probably many members of the board. So
Absolutely, come on up. and-
I don't know if it's
catch us
necessary
to speak, yeah.
One second. If we start to hear testimony, then it's sort of turning into a hearing, and then just people have the right of cross-examination. I think perhaps a better course would be, why don't we hear from our engineer on this?
That's fine.
About status,
Okay,
and
sure.
perhaps we can
Just have a colloquy in terms of where we stand. Okay.
Let me give the board the background and reason why this applicant is here tonight. Sycamore Landing is a project on Route 22 adjacent to the Phillipsburg Mall. It's a multifamily development with 247 units, including 50 affordable units. The original approval for that development was approved by this board back in 2010. There were some amendments that were approved back in 2012. There was a second set of amendments that were approved back in 2013. What that amendment had to do with was an access road that was proposed that was going to connect this particular development to the Phillipsburg Mall Loop Road. The original plans from 2010, 2012 that showed that connection. Those plans were fully approved by our office. It was not only a vehicular connection, but there was also a pedestrian connection. There was a sidewalk network that was going to run from the site all the way to the Sears, actually, to get people in and out of the mall on foot. The applicant ran into difficulties with the the new owner of the mall at the time, and came back to the board and asked the board to relieve that particular requirement. The applicant actually had referred to it as a postponement at the time, and had indicated that they were going to continue to try to get the legal right to make that connection both from the vehicular perspective and a pedestrian perspective to the mall site from the Sycamore Landing project. The board in 2013 granted the amended approval, but there was a condition that said that they had to continue trying to make the connection happen. I'm happy to hear that in 2016 they were actually able to make that happen, and I do have a copy of an approved easement that was recorded to allow that to happen. The chief question tonight is we had a set of plans that showed this vehicular connection. It was approved from an engineering perspective. They took some of that information off the plans in 2013. Now they put it back on. Does this board want to see this applicant come back and amend the approval again to, because now they have the legal right to do it, or can I just deal with this applicant administratively and just allow them to move forward into the construction with the loop road? They actually want to move ahead and do the work at this point. But the engineering plans that we saw back in 12 are the same plans that we now have back in the plan set in 16 right now. There's no difference.
So the connection is exactly the same?
The connection's exactly the same right now. So if that's the question, does this applicant have to return to the board and amend the approval a third time? Because now they were able to execute the Mall Road connection, or are we allowed to handle it administratively as the engineers? Because this was always contemplated. The applicant had a condition that he had to go out and try to make this happen in 2013. That's a chief question for the board tonight. If you believe that it doesn't have to happen, then I can work with the applicant like I've been working with them for the last 2 years on the construction of the site, and will allow them to move forward with this Mall Road connection. If you want them to amend the approval and have a paper trail, so to speak, then they're going to have to make an application to the board and formally amend their approval to get that connection back approved as part of the application. So that's really the issue for you tonight.
the conditional approval that happened in 2012, there isn't an expiration date or a time frame on that, right? So we're okay there now.
No,
Runs with the
there
land.
is not. And it's apparent to me that this loop road was part of the original approval and just held in abeyance. The connection was until they can work out the legal issues. There's nothing for this board to do in reviewing this. It's also clear to me that this will only enhance public health and safety, and I think we're putting form over substance to require the applicant to do that. This is what my kids call a no-brainer.
You know, I remember, and the loop road, it's a good idea. Eric, the thing is 3 years old. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new members. I prefer if they come back. Just because most of the guys have not seen the plans, they know nothing about it. So it is my opinion. And while I understand the road is a good idea, it needs to be done because we're always concerned that there was no entry for fire personnel if there's ever anything happening at the entrance. But we have so many new people, and it's 3 years old. It's not that it was last year. My preference is that they come back. All right.
I hate to vote against a no-brainer, I really do, but, I don't know, I was told it was approved, got its final resolution on May 22nd, 2013. I was not here. I've never seen the plans, and honestly, as a planning board member, I have a difficult time voting on something I've never seen. I don't know if there's a way we can expedite the process or work with these guys, but I just really have a hard time voting on something I've never seen.
I was on the planning board at the time, and I was strictly against the development to start with only one egress and ingress. I brought it to the attention of the planning board and the general public at the time. If we would have a fire in there, and if we would have to call Lopatcong Township, Greenwich Township, Alta, Bloomsbury, Swartsville, if they would have to respond to a call there, they would have to take Route 22 westbound to the 3rd Street Junction in Lopatcong Township, make a U-turn, and go back down to the entrance of the Phillipsburg Mall. This road was on the original plans. It was deleted because of the problem with the owners of the Phillipsburg Mall. I want to thank the people for continuing to pursue this. Even though they couldn't get the access with the owners of the Phillipsburg Mall, they did move their condos, townhouses, garages to leave that road right away vacant. And it's my understanding that they're going to come up through the same roadway that was proposed originally.
Well, Gary, you're right.
I think of any time that we waste making these people come back again, and I'm talking as a safety aspect.
My observation is it's very seldom does an applicant come back over-delivering on something that they didn't have to at a significant expense, but that's what we have here. I guess troubleshooting looking forward, if the matter comes back as a formal application, because that was the board's preference tonight, theoretically, the board would do something different to or with respect to the road in question and the access in question within the context of the board and the entity of the board, not all the board members that are sitting today. Changing a condition previously approved by the board running with the land that technically still exists and hasn't been rescinded, it's going to be as much a problem for the applicant as it's going to be for the board.
No. Let me say this. We just had the issue with Donna not being able to vote on 15-minute chimneys, and we didn't want to vote on an application. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new members on the board who are supposed to vote on plans they have never seen.
We're not asking the board, and I say this respectfully, we're not asking the board to vote on plans we've never seen. This board is the planning board, whether it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, it's still the planning board. Its constituents may be fluid, its members may be fluid, but it's still the board. The board approved, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this board approved those plans with that connection. the connection was held in abeyance, but the approved plans, as I understand it, show that connection. I don't think there's any action formally for the board to take. So I just have to call it the way I see it. I'm not,
I understand everything you're saying, sorry, but, I mean, we could have just as easily had the resolution of approval here tonight, and maybe the plan sheet, so we saw what we were talking about. I have no idea what we're talking about. I pick it up from the discussion, but very hard for me to vote on something I've never seen before.
I'm saying that there's really no need to vote.
The plans are approved. It's,
Plans are approved.
I already
There's
approved
no
it.
need to vote.
If they came,
You've already approved them. I was here.
if there was an application here, I would not have any review comments on the Mall Loop Road because I already approved the plans. I had an exhaustive review several years ago, and they're already into the plan set again. So it really would just be administrative in nature. I'd have zero comments on this whole thing because we already approved it.
So we have an approved application with a condition that they work it out with the owner of the mall. They met their condition.
Right.
So my question is why are we doing anything?
Because out of an abundance of caution, Paul brought this to the board, wanting to make sure that you were aware of what's going on. But I don't wish to speak for Paul, but I'm of the opinion that no action by this board is necessary.
It's really my respect for the board and the conditions of approval. That's why the first matter was here with Mr. Souders. Is I'm not going to allow somebody to go to construction without meeting a condition. So I just wanted, this was a major issue for the board going back 4 years ago in 2013. And I just wanted the board to be aware that this applicant did come through and find out if I could continue working with them through the process, through the construction process, and make sure that you're okay with that. And that, you didn't want to see maybe a step taken back and having some sort of amendment to the approval. That's really what it's all about. It's my respect.
Eric, I wouldn't want to, I have all the respect for one of the other new board members and stuff like that. But to drag your feet and hold these people up, and I'm talking strictly on the safety aspect. This place is getting close to residency now.
What's the timing? When does it open? Or is it open?
Yeah, we anticipate starting the leasing process within the next 30 to 60 days. We have about 72 units that are just nearing completion, and we expect to hopefully work with Mr. Sturbridge and certificate of occupancies for that.
Yeah, the safety
The
issue
sooner
you're
the second
referring to.
road is in there, the safer them people are going to
It
be.
makes a lot of sense.
Right, and that was hashed out
And I would
before
agree
on
with
previous
professionals,
application.
and of course with Public Works, that getting that second road in is important. From a paperwork perspective, I'd be concerned that if you had any modifications approved through DOT or county or soil conservation district, that they're also aware that you're also going through this process with them, let them know in case they have any comments. If you're disturbing more soil again, then you put your proper controls up in place before you do that work. But again, that would just be a paperwork that if you have other approvals with other agencies that you've done modifications for, that you're also letting them know that you're now moving forward.
The original approval contained all those conditions of approval.
But if they had approvals
They
of
had them.
modifications that removed them. You said 2013 they removed some stuff and now they're putting it back in. If they did that with other agencies, I would be concerned that they're reaching out to them as well.
If the board gives our engineer the authorization to move forward with this administratively, Paul doesn't miss anything. If there is another agency that reviewed plans that are different than these and that they need to review them again, it will get done. But I think we're just putting form over substance here.
Let me cast this a different way. We approve a lot of things with conditions. You might have 5, 6, 7 conditions. Call one, come back to the board with each condition as these are fulfilled. And I'm relying on your legal opinion that he has a valid approval. And it's in your opinion, he's not obligated to come back. And if that's the case, I can go along with this.
That is my opinion.
All right. You flipped me.
I think, as a courtesy, at the very least, we would want to see if you can submit the set of plans, just so we can catch up, so we know what was happening. I mean, I think tonight we can take a roll call on this thing and get Paul, attempt to get Paul working on it. But I think a lot of us would like to see it. We really don't know anything about the project, and as a courtesy to our new board members.
As a courtesy, they came back.
Yeah.
As a courtesy, they came back and brought this issue to our attention. As a courtesy, I'm sure they can give us a home.
I've driven by this, if I was going to be a tenant there, take place, just the idea of having to be able to circumvent.
I don't think we can.
No, we don't need to see them now.
I've had access to the shopping malls.
Yeah, we're not doing a review now.
But
But,
right behind
yeah.
this 90-degree turn right behind Steers.
Yeah.
Off on
To make it easier
the
for
north
the
end of
people
Steers.
living there to avoid Route 22 until they can feed in through the shopping
Right.
center.
Even anybody living there and stuff would still have to come up to 3rd, if they were heading westbound. They would still have to come to 3rd Street and make the U-turn and go back down to Sycamore Lane. Where this way, with the back entrance being put in, they could turn there at the stoplights at the Philipsburg Mall now, go back into the ring road.
And exit that
And
way,
go into
too.
the back side of Sycamore Lane.
So at this point, I'm looking for a motion to allow Paul to work with them and making sure that.
Do we even need a motion? Do we need a vote?
I gotta say,
Do we need to do anything?
I think the board should make a determination that no further action by this board is necessary. This was part of the original approval, and that our engineer is authorized to move forward with the review of, to the extent it's even necessary, the review of the plans for the reconstruction.
Will that generate any paperwork? I'd like to see it. I would go along with this. Would it be good?
I will prepare a resolution memorializing the board's decision on this particular issue.
We'll get a set of plans and copies to the board secretary next day or two this week. So,
Is
Do we need?
there a motion along those
I'll
lines?
make that, John. I'll make that motion.
Second?
Okay. It's roll call.
Yes. Members Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Schneider. Yes. Wolf.
Yes.
Mayor McKay,
Yeah.
Vice Chairman Chesky,
No.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
thank you.
Can I ask a question while I have you? I don't know if it's the right place or the right time, but I was made aware of something in Sycamore Landing, which was, and Paul, maybe you know, it's something to do with the removal of the trees within Sycamore Landing. And I'm looking at our zoning and land use ordinance, and it says that for cutting all these trees down, there was a permit required. And it also says that if you cut down more than 100 trees, that 70% of the trees which are cut down need to be replaced. Do we know if that has happened in any form?
Well, they obtained a site plan approval. There were
Yeah, that's-
requirements in the landscaping plan.
Part of the reason why, if we brought them back in for the road, we'd all want to look at every other detail that's already been approved by the board, which is one of the reasons why I kind of didn't want to see it, because I think I would have a lot of questions that the previous members of the board would have asked or not asked years ago. I wouldn't want to rehash all that on an approved plan. You know,
I'd be glad to bring the approved plan to the next meeting and review the landscaping plan with you. There's extensive landscaping that's proposed
Okay.
in light of the vast tree removal that took place on the site. It was a 20-acre site.
That's right. All right, thanks.
Right. Extensive grading on the site.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that back to our attention and keeping us in the loop on that.
Appreciate your cooperation.
Next item is a continuation of the Bergen self-storage application from last month.
I don't know how I do the lucky card on my birthday. Cover all these applications. Everybody's asking me if they need to know on my birthday. I just don't think so. True. So, again, for the record, my name is Don Souders. I'm an attorney with the Florio Pucci Law Firm. I'm here representing Perugia Self-Storage. my understanding is that there was rather extensive testimony at this, before the board last month. The hearing commenced. There was a completeness determination made with respect to preliminary site plan approval. An open issue remains, as I understand it, the issue of completeness with respect to final site plan approval. And I think that the most recent, early February 6th, there were substantial plan revisions and data transmitted to the board by our engineer and professionals, which I think should have adequately addressed most of the open completeness issues with respect to final. So at some point, probably early on, we should deal, I'm asking the board if we could deal with the issue of completeness on the final, because if we get through testimony tonight, we're going to have a decision on our end, obviously, to make whether, if you're ready to make a decision or vote on the application.
Just real quick, I'm not so sure that the board granted the waivers for preliminary site plan approval. They granted it for completeness, just so we could hear the expert testimony. So, no, you do not have a preliminary site plan approval at this point.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I understand. But there was this sort of this distinction made on the waivers relative to preliminary and final. So, administratively, housekeeping, that remains completely open. The issue of waivers, to the extent they're still remaining, and there's still a couple that are remaining, but I think a lot of them have been addressed.
If I can suggest, why don't you have your project engineer run through the changes to the plans? You can address the reports that address those changes from our professionals, and then make a determination on completeness or final, and go from there.
That's fine. Tom Decker is our project engineer. He testified, it's from the Van Cleef firm, extensively at the last meeting.
And he's still under oath.
Still under oath, still, I'm assuming, qualified, obviously. And if I could ask Tom if you could provide the details relative to your plan revisions, and to the extent necessary, when you're done, Tom, you can kind of go through Paul's review letter to the extent he addresses the changes and any remaining waivers that might be.
A quick suggestion, if you could start just with a quick 1 to 2 minute summary of the experts that we heard on the last meeting for the members of the public that may have missed the January meeting, on what, just run through the list of the experts we've already heard from.
Well, we had, and I wasn't here, and I didn't listen to the tape, but I did go through the files extensive, and Mr. Peck provided me with an outline. Mr. Decker testified on the engineering and technical issues relative to the site plan and the waivers, and obviously some of the C or bulk variances that are precipitated in large part because of the unusual shape of the property. John Angelieri testified. He's the principal on-site crossing LLC, which I understand is the record owner of the lot, and he has his family has a history in the township. His son is here. He operates an automotive repair business across on Route 57. So the Angelieris have been doing business in the township for a long time, but he gave a history of the site and his unsuccessful efforts relative to attempts to market it for other permitted uses, such as that's before you now. Mr. Ferrugia, Robert Ferrugia, he's the contract purchaser and the developer who's proposing the self-storage site in question. He testified about the nature of his plans, the economics of the plan, and some of the background facts that were relied upon by Mr. Montefort, who was a consultant in the area of self-storage facilities. He discussed, from a technical standpoint, what's being constructed, why it's serving it's a very specialized, they call third-generation self-storage facility, and I believe he testified to the extent that there's a real need for this type of facility in the community, and it's cutting edge. So, and then Mr. Snyder, who did not testify, he was present, Eric Snyder, he's our professional planner. He'll testify tonight with respect to the variances that are being requested.
We also had traffic engineers testify about the limited number of trips in and out on a daily basis, and
that's correct.
The number of parking spaces that would be insufficient in his opinion.
And no offense to Mr. Poliniak. He's here as well, and he's prepared to testify on some supplemental data that he had generated. And I think if he didn't submit it previously, it's just a little table that he's going to produce tonight as an exhibit. That's my understanding of who testified. It was likely a long night. Looks like we're going to be here all night tonight as well, which is fine. Tom, why don't you get back to the business at hand, which is your revised site plan.
We submitted revised plans. What we have in front of you is a colored rendering showing those revisions. So
Why don't we mark that?
is that
The
a,
last item marked there.
is it A2?
A1 is a colored rendering of the site.
Yeah.
I'm not aware.
Let me go through right now.
Which was part of the submission set.
Yeah, page 30 calls out A2, which was the colored building elevations. I think that was the last.
So this would be A3. Major revisions that occurred on the plan, as was discussed at the last meeting, there was discussion about parking requirements and so forth. There was testimony that a self-storage facility really requires less parking than what we had depicted, and we had discussed land banking, the 9 spaces in the front of the property, which is what we have shown here. On the plan, those spaces are still shown, but they're designated as land bank. And as you recall, land bank means that the area's been designated, stormwater's been designed for it, the rest of the site has been designed so that should sometime in the future it's determined that the 9 spaces along the front of the building are not adequate, the applicant can come back in and construct the 9 spaces. So if there's an issue, that would be part of the approval, just not built at this time, built if needed at a future date.
Can I ask you a quick question there? Would it make sense to put a mountable curb there, or, I mean, if you needed an extra space or two now?
In here?
You know,
Well, it's going to stay as grass.
I understand that, but there's lots of places where, rather than park sideways along curb, guys get, park on the grass.
I mean, we can certainly do that. It's the board's discretion.
I don't believe that we had a final determination at the last meeting. We were talking a lot about the parking spots, and I think there was some people had some different opinions, but we're going to have to talk about that later because we might want to see the full 18 or at least the pavement area so people can do U-turns with trailers and whatnot.
And as was mentioned before, the traffic engineer is here. He can discuss trips and so forth. I think he has some additional data that he can share with you as far as other uses and so forth. So I believe he'll be able to discuss that. But we wanted to show that we did revise the plans to show that, and it is back. We also talked about the applicant having a box truck on site that they would loan out. We've taken a look, spoken with the self-storage expert who testified last month, Mr. Ferrugia, and the size of the truck that would be offered would be essentially a 10-foot box truck. It's the smallest box truck you could rent from U-Haul, for example. It would fit within a standard parking space, so there would not need to be any larger space or expansion to accommodate that. And we would still have the loading area to the north, which accesses not only the sidewalk for bringing in materials to be stored, but also to access the trash enclosure. Also, there was discussion with regards to the entrance and movements along Stryker's Road and intersection with Baltimore Street. We met with Mr. Sturbins out at the field. I understand Mr. Sturbins has also met with the police chief with regards to our currently proposed alignment, and I believe both, and Mr. Sturbins can correct me if I'm wrong, both have agreed that this layout works. What the layout proposes is we widened the entrance slightly, and we proposed an island, a mountable island, at the road entrance. That would be a concrete island that is mountable, it has a mountable curb. And it would restrict turns from the site to making only a right-hand turn out onto Strikers Road. Okay. And that's also signed with a sign that says no left turn. And by putting in that island, it physically directs the traffic to make that right. The ingress would be a right turn in from Strikers, as well as a left turn in to eliminate any, to remove the vehicles from the road before they get up to Baltimore Street, which was a concern with the intersection. So the intersection, our entrance rather, has been designed for a right in, left in, and a right out only. So there's no lefts permitted to come out. Let's see. With regards to, there was a question, I believe Mr. Pryor brought up about freshwater wetlands. We did have a wetland expert go out to the site, evaluate it. He's issued a report, which I forwarded to the planner and engineer as well as the board secretary. It's on file, and the findings were that while there's a C1 stream located to the west, it's more than 800 feet away. And there are no wetlands or wetland transition areas within 300 feet of the subject property. So there's no wetland permits or regulations that we need to abide by.
Is there any need to mark that wetlands letter as an exhibit? It has been submitted. It was from PAW Land Consultants Inc. I think we should, dated February 17th. So, is it A4?
There was also an issue with regards to completeness. Will serve letters from utility companies. We did submit letters to utility companies requesting will serve letters. Those letters were included in the submission package. Since that time, we have received responses from 3 of the utility companies. I also forwarded those to professionals and the board secretary for the board's file.
I might as well, if I could, mark those A5, 6, and 7 respectively. Elizabethtown Gas Center letter, February 10th. I'll mark that as A5. Service Electric, I'll mark as A6. Their letter was sent it was dated February 14th, and JCP&L, I'll mark as A7. Their letter is dated February 10th.
Are there any outstanding letters still to be returned?
There's a couple. I think there's a couple might be good. Check that. What's this called? Maybe telephone. Check. The other thing is that we did receive a letter from the Warren County Planning Board stating that they don't have jurisdiction, don't affect a county road or structure. So they have no interest in the application. We also received a review letter from the Warren County Soil Conservation District with a few technical comments, which we've addressed and resubmitted to the Warren County Soil Conservation District. There was a comment, I believe, in Mr. Ritter's letter with regards to the sign on the building and its height. The sign measures 18 inches high. The letters are 18 inches high, 27 feet wide, for a total area of 41 square feet. The ordinance permits a total of 100 square feet for both the building-mounted and ground-mounted sign combined. We're currently not proposing a ground-mounted sign. Mr. Ritter's question was regarding the height, because the height was 19 feet shown on the plan, and I believe the concern was that it's higher than what is typically found for a building-mounted sign. Spoke with Mr. Ferrugia, and adjustments can be made to the building face to lower the sign, and you'd certainly be willing to work with Mr. Ritter on that.
To answer Mr. Fox's earlier question, what's outstanding? We're waiting to hear back from Aqua.
and Verizon.
One of the, I read George's report here, and the thing which for me is one of the most important, and Gary, you may appreciate that, is, did anybody speak to our fire chief?
Actually, I did. I let them know that there was an application, before they went.
So, George indicates here that for buildings over 10,000 square feet, you have to have certain fire protection in place, and it's not?
One of the completeness items that we had on in Mr. Sturbins' prior letter of January 20th, for the completeness items, which I can go through, included location design of all fire prevention measures. And what we've done is we've added notes to the plan stating that all fire prevention measures are to be in accordance with the approval of the local fire official and so forth. And we do show an FDC connection, fire department connection, at the front of the building. But again, we have the note in there that has to be worked out with the fire official. I believe we also have a note on there that the building is.
Who's reaching out to the chief?
It's actually county fire, these are fire.
Fire subcode. There is either George's letter or Paul's letter that said it has to be reviewed by the departmental fire chief and with his approval.
Okay.
That is addressed in one of the comments of either our engineer or our planner. And that would certainly be done before any building permits or opinions.
Very good, thank you.
There were other completeness issues in Paul's January 20th letter. And if you want to run through those, I think that was one of the first things we wanted to get out of the way. On page 3 and 13, completeness for preliminary site plans. Item 1A, I believe we provided that. Item B, we provided that. We provided the additional calculations for the storm sewer, and Mr. Sturbins indicated in his recent letter that he found those calculations to be acceptable. With regards to sanitary sewer flow data, that's been included on the plans, those calculations. Vertical profile of Strikers Road has also been added to the plans. Under item 2, where we had requested waiver, the first item was traffic impact statement. We did provide traffic testimony at the last hearing. Item 2B refers to the will serve letters, to which we've made the requests and we've received 3. We're still waiting for 2. And item 3, there were a few items. I believe the only one that was a concern was item E, which was regarding the wetlands, which we've addressed by having our wetlands expert go out in the field and confirm that there are no wetlands or wetland transition areas impacting that. And that was entered, I believe, as Exhibit A4.
Has our professionals seen that letter or certification that there's no wetlands?
I have not.
I have not either.
You haven't seen one?
I have not.
When was that submitted?
I emailed it to you yesterday. I emailed it to Paul.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
We marked it though as, was it A4?
Wetlands letter.
Yeah.
Maybe you can pass that up.
It's fairly brief. Which one is that now? That's your preference, I mean.
I can jump to the, it's got some substance to it, but I can jump to the last paragraph, which is the conclusion, and I can give you a copy of this.
You have a letter, Tom?
Yeah.
Do you have any extra copies? You can pass one up to, Paul.
It's not an extra copy, just so you know.
I don't have extra copies. We'll get all of his copies.
If I jump to the conclusion, there's data and so forth. It's 3 pages long. If you want, I can read the entire letter into the record. It's supports.
Why don't you give George and Paul an opportunity to take a look at it? Perhaps you can, instead of reading the entire
Jump to the
report into the record, maybe you can just provide us with a summary.
Sure. I'll read the conclusion on page 3.
Yes, sir.
Conclusion. From preliminary site investigation is concluded that block 116, lot 24.01, Lopatcong Township, Warren County, New Jersey, is an upland site that is not impacted by wetlands. No wetlands were identified within 300 feet of the property limits. In addition, the nearest waterway, which is a Category 1 water, is over 800 feet from the site. There were no extensions from that waterway that would impact the addressed site.
In other words, wetlands and stream buffers are a non-issue.
Correct. Those were the completeness items for preliminary. Final checklist items, some of them repeated. Item 1A, regarding the affidavit of the owner. Mr. Angelieri testified at the last meeting that he was the owner and consented to the application. Item 1B, again, those were calculations for the downstream storm sewer, which is accepted by Mr. Sturbins. Item C was sanitary sewer. Profiles of the sanitary sewers, which have been added. Item D, location, size, and type of proposed utility lines. They were added to the plan for water, gas, and the underground wired utilities. Item E, location, design of all fire prevention measures have not been provided. Again, we put in the FDC connection and notes that the plans are subject to the approval of the Township fire official. Item F would be a requested waiver at this point, and that is a complete list of site improvements. This is prepared to generate a cost estimate for the site improvements to determine any required bonding and inspection fees.
Actually, it was submitted. We did comply.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry, we did do that.
Question on that item. Is that cost estimate supposed to include the cost of the structure?
No.
No,
It is not. Okay.
no, it's only the site improvements.
Okay.
So we did provide that. Item 2 were waiver requests. Again, item A, 2A were the will serve letters. Item 2B, location and size type of proposed off-site improvements. We're not proposing any off-site improvements with this application. And item 3, again, I believe the only issue at the last meeting was with regards to the wetlands. That was item D of that. So those were the completeness items that have been addressed. So at this point, I guess, Don, we're looking for completeness for...
Yes. Be asking for, to the extent we have remaining preliminary waiver requests and also an acknowledgement that we've satisfied the checklist items that were delineated in the January 20th letter, subject, I guess, to a partial, I did my best to take notes. I think in paragraph 1 on the final site plan checklist from Mr. Sturbin's letters, that I think we provided that information on the plans and or through testimony. On paragraph 2, which is the will serve letters, we partially complied, so I guess technically we need a partial waiver with respect to the remaining 2 letters from Verizon to Aqua. And checklist item 2B really, it's our engineer's testimony that doesn't apply because we're not proposing any off-site improvements. So, and I don't think that Mr. Sturban's more recent letter of February 16th dealt in any further depth with respect to the issue of waivers. It was more technical review of the revised plans.
As far as completeness goes, we're looking to our engineer to give his opinion on that. A couple things that I wanted to just ask on the completeness issue is we only have an email from Highlands. We don't actually have their determination. Do we need more than an email to be complete? Or is that email going to be suffice? The fire protection measures, obviously they haven't done that yet. They intend to. He mentioned a couple other things that they were partially outstanding. So taking all that into consideration, should we be deeming this complete or just be looking for some more information still before we do that?
If I could just interpose a polite objection. On the Highlands letter, we didn't mark it as an exhibit if it hasn't been signed. It was transmitted electronically earlier today to our planner, and it was addressed to the planning board secretary. I don't know if you're going to receive it, but why don't we just mark, it will be signed tomorrow, and any condition, any waiver could be, I guess, conditioned upon receipt of a signed copy of the letter that I would mark as A8. That's the board's pleasure.
Previously, we've accepted emails from Highlands and certainly accept the applicant's representation that the letter is just waiting to be signed. I don't, that doesn't stand for my standpoint.
Yeah, I think the email we received prior to the last meeting indicated that this application was consistent with the Highlands Regional Master Plan and the Township's approved petition. They did note that they were looking at the plans versus their policies, and they would have a detailed letter. And what we probably need to do is once we get that letter, if there's anything in the Highlands letter that indicates they have to do any plan revisions or report revisions, we should make our approval conditioned upon that. It's just a normal process.
And for the board's benefit, they issued a consistency determination subject to 2 specified conditions. And let me just read the conditions into the record. Condition 1 is, with respect to carbonate rock, the geotechnical report includes an evaluation and recommendations regarding development and construction measures. The municipal engineer's review and approval of these measures prior to any construction being performed will be a condition of any Highlands Council approval. That's the end of condition 1. Condition 2 says, copies of the final approved site plans, 1 hard copy and 1 digital copy, an approving resolution must be submitted to the Highlands Council. That's probably a general catch-all condition in all the approvals. So
We have other outstanding items as well, which might deem this incomplete. But Paul, what do you think about what's the protocol here? I mean, we want to hear the last expert testimony, so we're deeming it complete as far as the presentation goes. We want to hear your next expert, obviously. But as far as, can we hear the next expert before we deem this to be complete or not, or do we have to do that first?
Clearly, at the last meeting, the board was troubled with the number of completeness comments, particularly as related to the final site plan application, the number of technical comments that George and I had. So the board made a decision to only deem the preliminary major site plan application to be complete. You deemed the final site plan application to be incomplete at the last meeting. So the question is do you deem that particular application complete tonight? I would note that there's been substantial changes made to the plans, and Mr. Decker, indicated some other documents that were provided to the board to try to deal with some of those technical issues as well as some of those completeness issues at the last meeting. From my perspective, I actually think the final site plan application should be complete now, so that both applications are complete. Doesn't preclude you from asking for other information as we proceed our way through this particular hearing process, but I think they provided the information that's on the checklist now, on both checklists. So I think it should be deemed complete. That's my opinion.
And we need to do this before the expert testimony continues?
Not necessarily, but I think just for housekeeping, so that the application is deemed complete and we can move forward, there should be a motion. If anybody has any questions, fine. If not, someone should make a motion to deem the application final complete.
And it doesn't eliminate us from making comments or changes to the site plan. It's only administrative item. It's only administratively complete. They have everything.
They're not approving anything.
Okay.
And I marked as A8 the February 22nd letter from Highlands.
Very well. Thank you.
So as far as the fire protection and the signage goes and the adjustments that have to happen moving forward, that can happen on the site plan
review
and comments. The completeness doesn't stop us from making comments on
No, not at all.
on any of the issues.
Just says we're going to hear it.
All right.
Well, the board has some choices here as we accumulate information that we make that needs to be done to the plans or the reports. You can, and let's say we get to the point where perhaps a vote can be taken, you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to do a vote with all these things that we accumulated as conditions, or you can tell the applicant to go back and make some further revisions and clean the stuff up before you take a vote. That's really the board's goal. It's a policy decision for the board.
But we'll get to that when, after the testimony's been offered. I understand there's an objector here with testimony to offer, and you'll hear all of it, and then we can start to talk.
Is there any additional comments as far as the completeness is considered? So then we'll look for a motion to deem it complete so we can hear the rest of
I'll make a motion that the application as presented is now complete for
Final site
site plan review.
Is deemed complete.
Deemed complete.
I knew you meant that. Second.
Second.
Do we do all in favor on this one, Beth, or just roll call?
I'll roll call. Members Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Schneider,
Abstain, right, voting on anything tonight?
No.
Tony?
You can vote on completeness for
Okay,
this, because this is something that has been addressed this evening.
okay, and yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Mayor McKay,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Pesky,
Yes.
and Mel.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so the next order of business I would suggest is the balance of any engineering, substantive, technical testimony from Mr. Decker using Mr. Sturban's February 16th technical report 2 as a guide, an outline for some additional testimony from Tom.
The February 16th letter essentially includes the comments from the January meeting with bold text as far as what's been addressed. Majority of the letter is noted as being satisfied. Represent to the board all the other items that may have some minor cleanup to them we've agreed to comply with, and we will take care of those minor revisions to the plan. The only thing that I would remind the board is that there are a few design waivers that are noted in Mr. Sturban's letter, and just to refresh the board's memory, a waiver with regards to the off-street loading berth size, which was testified to at the previous hearing. We do provide a loading berth, it just doesn't meet the township requirement, and we testified as to the size restrictions on the trucks entering the site. Another waiver was for the aisle width. The ordinance requires a 25-foot wide aisle width. We proposed 24-foot. Mr. Sturbans has indicated in his letter he has no objection to granting a waiver for that. With regards to landscaping for the parking lot, there those certain requirements for open space. This is comment number 4.07 on page 10 that reads over into page 11. Had to do with landscape islands, 25-foot buffers from the park, and so forth. And I believe that those were all of the waivers that, design waivers that would be requested. And that's all I have. Any questions?
So as far as expert testimony, does this conclude?
This concludes our engineer's testimony. Obviously, he's available now for comment. He may be called back later, depending on how the hearing goes relative to any other.
And then to be consistent with the way we did it on the last meeting, is we'll take comments from the audience, or we'll take questions from the audience as far as this expert goes.
First from the board and the board's professionals, and then if they have any questions, we'll open it up to the public for questions.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know.
I did have one, getting back to, Beatrice Mountain, curb to death.
Yes.
If a fire truck had to get in there and maneuver, fire lane, there could be cars in there. Could a truck get in there and get out? These tall buildings, they like to get some water on the roof. And I asked that question.
Our traffic expert can provide some additional testimony with regards to this, but there is limited availability for turning around, doing a complete turnaround in the parking lot. There is availability and there is room, which is one of the reasons why we kept it as a mounted curb, so that larger trucks can.
Yeah, and I'm saying if you had a mountable curb where you have your banks, at least that gives the truck a little more room.
We could certainly look into that.
Well, it's a question, and if you want to lay that off on your traffic engineer,
That's
okay with that.
I don't think we have any objection to putting in mountable curb there. It doesn't. The drainage drains from east to west, so the curbing doesn't serve any type of the drainage purpose. So it could certainly be mountable for emergency services.
It's actually interesting. So I kind of agree with Joe, but as another alternative, if you wanted to keep the parking bank and the land bank for those cars, I know even just right up the road on the Larkin, Warren Heights property, they have the geopavers that let the grass come up through the squares. Could you get permission to pop straight through to the adjacent parking lot through that strip right there as an emergency egress for fire? So if there's no room for them to turn around, they can still get in and then just drive straight out. I don't know if that's...
Well, the other thing, I was going to say the other thing that the fire truck may likely do, in case of emergency, he's probably going to pull in here where he can access the building from this side.
I went there today, and without having a fire chief here, it's all guesswork. There are fairly large trees in between, and what you don't see on the plan, there's like a power transformer, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And which is there. It's a fairly. I would really like to speak to our fire chief. I don't know how you get to the building, but.
Yeah, they can really only get there from the front. There's parking, there's no fire lane, and I know the towns I work, they always, a tall building like this, they want to get some water on the
Now,
roof, so.
let me ask you that, if there's a fire in the building and the truck has to go in the parking lot, is that not too close to be to a building which is on fire, Joe?
That's out of my expertise, but they generally like to get up the ladder and get some water on the roof, so. That's what I've seen. That's what I usually hear, so I raise that question.
The other thing, just as a reminder to the board, the building is fully sprinkled, as a sprinkler system.
I know, that doesn't always.
I mean, that's going to be the first
Puts the small ones out.
The first response to be the.
I mean, and because it is so tight, they're adjacent buildings fairly close. I like to speak to the fire chief.
And he did not comment on this, Ben?
What's the size?
And we don't have, and again, we don't have a problem with the amount. Certainly put that in.
You get a fire engine in, how are they gonna get in? Do they have enough space to turn? What would be the size on that of a fire engine?
We provided truck turning for a garbage truck, if you will,
Yeah.
on the plans. That shows that a garbage truck has adequate ability to come into the site and pull out. I don't know what type of equipment the fire department
They
has.
do want to make it permanent. They'd like to set it land.
If it would be a fully involved structure fire, we wouldn't be into the parking lot anyhow, other than just one attack truck to tie into your standpipe in the front of the building. The other attack sites would all be fought with either platforms or aerial ladders.
So
Our township, we have a 100-foot.
right?
Harmony has,
The ladder truck would never go into the parking lot. The ladder
Right.
truck would probably be anywhere from on
It would take up
on
the
the
whole
road,
park,
that's
or one of the other two parking lots.
and our ladder truck is 100-foot.
It's not an occupied building, in other words, like there's no residents in there or anything like that, so it's basically surrounded and drowned.
I canvassed our professionals to see if we had, in our collective experience, ever heard a fire official for a township testify at a planning board meeting. And the answer to that is no. Doesn't mean you can't ask for it, but generally, we defer to the fire official as to whether adequate fire protection can be provided to the building. And if it is that person's opinion that it cannot, they have to come back. That's the bottom line. I don't think anyone here has the expertise to offer an opinion on whether there's adequate access for firefighting equipment.
I agree.
I've had this issue before, and actually Harmony Township, where the fire official there was refusing, and ultimately did refuse to appear at the board, and then there was a hearty discussion with the board as to why their fire chief would come and testify, but I think his response in part was a respectful no, I'm a volunteer, I spend 100 hours a week at my fire station. I reviewed the plan, I presented a letter, which is typical, and then we got into discussion about how do you compel your fire chief, or do you even want to try and compel your fire chief to come, but we're comfortable deferring to whatever recommendations, obviously, that the fire department makes with respect to that.
We didn't even get a letter here though, right? We didn't even get a letter, did we?
And that's kind of, it's unfortunately out of our control. We can't do anything really as the applicant to compel your municipal official to do A, B, C, or D. We've done what we could, and we've acknowledged an obligation to comply with his recommendations and come back if we can.
In regards to Tony's comment about firemen, you're not going to get our departmental fire chief to come in here and testify.
I wouldn't think so.
And I'll tell you the reason for it is everybody in this country today is sue happy. We're all volunteers. You're not going to put your neck out there on the line and commit yourself to say we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We'll do the best we can when we can.
Understood.
So I heard that the fire chief wants to look at the set of plans, so,
They always do.
yeah, so we haven't done that yet, obviously. That's
If he needs another set, I think we submitted a sufficient number, but we'll get another set of, okay.
Do we have other sets lying?
Yeah.
Okay. So other questions from the board? Okay, so we're going to open up to public questions for this expert, for this witness only.
Once again, the traffic situation, I know you probably have a traffic analyst. But as a person that travels that route quite often, there's school children traffic, school traffic coming out of there twice a day. There's the right-hand turn off of Baltimore on the Strikers. There's what you propose is left hand off of Strikers into this building structure. The pile up of all the traffic at one time in that left hand turn into Baltimore. and a left-hand turn into your building. And then right-hand turns out Baltimore, and the size of the street itself in front of us, right at that curve, is really, what would you think you should do on that one?
Actually, I'm going to defer to our traffic engineer.
Okay,
We'll be back.
the other thing is with this fire situation, I just want to make a comment, that if the fire company doesn't make a statement, nobody makes a statement. This is just maybe not you, but, who's going to determine what the adequate insurance on the building is going to be, like the contents and things of that nature?
That's outside of my.
All right, and, yeah, okay, so I think the statement about the fire department should be made in public, or somehow the public should know about it.
If you can just identify yourself.
Yes,
for the record.
my name is John Betson, and I live in Brakely Gardens at 225 Red School Lane.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Do we have other public questions today?
Thank you. My name is John Visconti. I'm an attorney representing Market, so we'll be providing some additional testimony. But just very quickly, it's just the one loading area that's contiguous to the garbage?
Yes, there's one loading area that's contiguous to the garbage. What was testified at the prior meeting was this would also serve as a location for delivery trucks to enter and offload equipment, or I'm sorry, offload whatever anybody wants to store there, and there would be a restriction that there would be no tractor trailers permitted.
Are you doing anything to ensure that there's no residents or tenants parked with a box truck when garbage is attempting to be picked up?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, that would be an operational thing for Mr. Ferrigio to answer, or our traffic expert, with regards to what the movements would be. Garbage pickup could be scheduled, so it'd be not during business hours.
And is there a reason you're not asking for a waiver, for a variance for 2 loading spaces? I think pursuant to the ordinance, aren't they required to have 2? It's 1 for every 30,000 feet or part of 30,000 feet of usable space?
I'm not aware of that. Is there,
well, a gross floor area, there's 31,000 feet gross floor area. Would they need to continue the second? I recognize this may be more for your professionals then, but it's relevant to this testimony.
you have the ordinance number?
It's section 243-51. Section A. And it's 1 berth for every 30,000 square feet or part thereof of gross floor area of non-residential uses.
You're going to come back up and have some other experts. I think we can
That's fine.
certainly address that. That'll give us a few minutes to look at it, and we'll keep the meeting moving.
Just one final question for this gentleman, if I can find it. Excuse me, 2 questions. There's a basin in the back, is that correct? Is it retention or detention?
It is it's a detention basin with a bio-retention filter bottom to it for water quality. Below that is a impervious liner, because we are in a carbonate district where, in most cases, as we previously testified to, we provide water quantity, water quality, and groundwater recharge.
What's the maximum depth of water that could be there standing in a 100-year storm? I don't mean to put you on the spot that way, but what is it? What are its specs for how much standing water can be there?
It would be less than 4 feet.
Is there any fencing surrounding that?
No.
Should there be? Isn't there a daycare right next door within 50 feet?
There's no requirement that it be fenced. The standing water in there would be eliminated within within 72 hours, actually less than that. We're not talking about a lot of flow into or out of that basin. It's fairly small in size. All I can say is there's no fence to propose now.
Would the applicant consider any buffering or fencing or anything like that to prevent access to anyone who's going by?
Confirm with the
There would be no objection for the applicant fencing in the detention basin.
Correct.
We would want to look at that ourselves too. You know, right now we have a lot of fencing around our detention bases, which we're considering removing. It doesn't work, and it's an eyesore. This might be a different situation because of where it's located.
Chairman.
But
He was only did his homework and stayed up late. He's right. There's a daycare center right there, and it's 4 feet of water.
all right, is a daycare center have a fence around it? Like I said, we need to look into it and come up with.
There is fencing around their play area in the back.
So all things to take into consideration. That was my point.
And I'm assuming that
Now,
the children are supervised, but
on top of that, we're talking about developing the property behind it, right? So there will be residents and people and children playing, and so
we're able to put the fence up.
something you have to look at.
And then just very quickly, finally, you mentioned turning radii. Does the mountable island at the entrance change any of the turning radii? Has that any of that been tested? Does that
Actually, by putting in the mountable island, we actually opened up the overall opening of the entrance drive. It makes it easier for a larger vehicle, such as a garbage truck, to access the site because there is a wider throat.
well, if the island,
The garbage truck would, which is one reason we made it mountable, the garbage truck would have a couple tires that would go over the concrete curb of the median as it enters. But that was the reason for the mountable curb, and we also included that island again to channel the traffic leaving the site.
how wide is your, just in front of the front face of the building, it appears to be the widest section of the loading or parking area. How wide is
The
that?
parking area here, 42 feet.
Okay, thank you.
You go. Just what's that?
Need to be sworn in or?
Are you an expert or are you a public comment?
Public comment.
Just state your name and.
David Gardner.
All right, just, David, you're with Larkin, you're represented by counsel.
Correct.
Are you going to, you have your attorney here to question this witness. Is there anything else you want your attorney to ask this witness? There's going to be an opportunity for public comment, and certainly will allow you that.
Well, because this gentleman is the engineer, and I have design questions. So I don't have a engineer here right now. I have a planner.
But you do have a lawyer.
I do, but I can tell him what I'm not going to ask, but.
His entity is represented. If you wanted to ask in an individual capacity, there's really no harm. Well, we certainly don't want to stretch the board's patience, but
I think some of you know we have a huge objection to this, with all these variances and all these waivers and everything you're gonna, that you're entertaining right now. So we have a tremendous concern with what they're doing, and I want to point out about the design of this thing. I've been working in this town for 24 years. To not have a spot for the fire trucks to go around the back. Our shopping center right over here. What if there's...
One second, please, 1 second.
The whole point here is that you're represented by counsel. And if you're represented by counsel, that's why you have an attorney here. Let your attorney ask the questions. You want to huddle with him for a few minutes? Otherwise...
Tony, why can't you not ask yourself?
These questions look like it's relevant to your presentation you're going to be doing in a few minutes. So
it's not, but they're entitled to ask all the questions they want.
I think they should be going to testify. Since I'm going to testify, it's fine. I'll sit down.
1 second, though. I would like, why can you not ask himself?
in fairness to the counsel, it's a reasonable, he's represented by counsel, so his entity is represented by counsel, so his questions through Larkin should go through his attorney.
Okay.
That's a legitimate request.
That's fine. And I know David for 20 years, and I'm sure he'll ask good questions or have testimony, but We have to follow the rules.
Any further questions, comment?
And you're not represented by counsel, correct?
No, my name is Marisa Marinelli.
Thank you.
The house over there belongs to my family. Across the street, yes. Just a couple of quick questions. The poll, you said Verizon, you don't have a letter from Verizon? I think that's one of the things that's missing. Does Verizon control the telephone pole that's there? Is that?
It depends. I'm not sure. Sometimes the telephone company owns it, sometimes the electric company owns the pole itself, and the other utilities tie into it. What we're proposing for utilities is there's a pole located to the northeast corner of the site, and we're proposing underground. We'll come down the pole and then access.
Right, but I mean, that pole gets hit frequently, and it's replaced 2 or 3 times a year because of accidents. It's a very dangerous corner, so I would just think that somebody who was ever in charge of that pole should have a comment on what's going on, or someone should look into that, because it is a dangerous corner. We've had cars on our property, we've had cars hit our house. That pole gets hit quite frequently. My second question is, and I'm sorry I wasn't at the last meeting, but I heard you talk about waivers for the parking spaces, waivers for open spaces. How tall is the building, by the way? I heard you talk about height of the building.
The building itself is 44.6 feet. The height permitted by ordinance is 45. So we're permitted 45 feet, and the building height itself is 44.6.
Okay, so there's no waiver required for that. Okay, so but there's waivers for parking, waivers. How many waivers are there?
No, that's not. There is one waiver because we can only have from how many stories?
Well, from a height standpoint, we comply.
That's right.
With that. There is also, and our planner will provide additional testimony from the planning perspective, that 3 stories is permitted, 4 stories is proposed, and there was testimony at the last hearing with regards to the architecture of the building.
And so that's going to be like the tallest building in the area by far, right? I mean, there's houses across the street, there's the little mall, there's the daycare center.
Right.
There's nothing 4 stories high in the area, is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and you need a waiver, to build that 4
But you
stories.
could have a 3-story building that's 45 feet tall, so that's...
What's the current height of the buildings there in the strip mall? Do we know
The
that?
buildings in the strip mall, I don't have an exact measurement. I'm going to say, there's a cupola on the back portion of this building.
How about roof? The highest point on the roof?
The highest point on the roof, I'm going to say, is probably about 25 feet.
I think Mr. Gardner would be in a position to answer that question.
Okay, good question.
Okay, so do you know how many waivers that you're asking for the whole site? I mean, I think the acreage too is below an acre, right, of the current property? And you need 2 acres? So you need that's variance,
So
right?
it's a non-conforming lot.
Right.
Pre-existing non-conforming lot.
Right, so you have less than 50% of the acreage that you need in order, to build this project, right?
Correct.
Okay, and how many other waivers do you need to actually build this project?
Enumerated in the Township professionals' letters.
Perhaps their planner, when he testifies, can identify that because his testimony is going to go to the issue of the variances and the waivers. So I think he's more than capable of answering those questions.
Okay, thanks, I'll come back.
Thank you. Any further questions? Audience? Okay, any questions further? Oh, wait. I'm not seeing it. We have...
Okay, so, this is my father. So he wants to make his comments, but is that...
That's at the end.
That's at the end?
These are questions for the expert witness.
Now, are you going to call your traffic expert back, or is he just...
I will.
Okay.
This is your last...
No, he's got...
I have,
There's a
Mr.
plan too.
Poliniak will testify very briefly with respect to a schedule that he's prepared,
So real quick, what do you have left as far as...
I have our traffic engineer, who should be very, very brief.
Okay.
I have Mr. Snyder, who's our professional planner, who will testify on the specific variances and the burden with respect to them. And then I have Mr. Ferrugia, who's going to provide some testimony at the end as well.
Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll resume at 8:40, and we'll continue right off where we left off.
Everybody is up to date?
Yeah.
I bet.
We're ready. Got 5
We're going to continue our meeting. Everybody take their seats. So we're ready for your next expert witness.
Are we waiting for Paul or?
I think just give him 1 minute. He should be here.
Gary's gone too.
Was Mr. Frank during
She was at the person.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Ball out there?
He's in the men's room.
$1 to go.
You put those things in the air.
It's getting a little switch over to blue. I'm ready. What about that?
Well, you know, it's gotta get your. What? You feel it already?
He went to take over highway pit. He's worried about it right away. It's inside it. The plan calls for the side. Yeah. He doesn't
I was there at the lunch. That's what I thought. Was fun.
This is kind of like rateable change.
No. No, you go to the city.
All right, everybody's here. We're all set. Looking for the next witness.
Call Mr. Poliniak, the traffic expert. He did testify, I believe, at the last hearing when he was sworn, and he qualified as such. I've marked as an exhibit tonight a small table that we marked as A9. I don't think it was previously distributed, but we do have extra copies. We can circulate those out. This is a chart that's titled IT Trip Generation Comparison, Self-Storage versus Permitted Uses. I think this was an issue that was raised at the last hearing. And what this says, A9, I think. A9, okay.
Yes.
No.
I think I'm getting one.
I don't know.
A9.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Poliniak, I direct your attention respectfully to A9, Exhibit A9 tonight. Could you summarize the data that's set forth in that table and the basis for saying.
Yeah, sure. At the last hearing, somebody requested this information from the board, do a comparison of the peak hour trip generation for the proposed use versus some use that could be proposed on site that are variance-free applications. So what you see is calculations performed using data provided by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Last meeting I testified to that in the morning peak hour, there were 2 vehicles entering, 2 vehicles exiting in the morning peak hour, 4 and 4 in the evening peak hour. I mentioned that other uses like an office or a retail component would generate more traffic, just have a quantity at that time. So we put this table together, and as you can see, particularly during the evening peak hour, a 2,900 square foot office and a 960 square foot retail building generate substantial amount of traffic more than the use proposed on site. What you have is a vacant piece of property that has the ability and right to be developed, with the driveway proposed at a location that is the best for this location due to sight lines, as agreed upon with your engineer, and with a use that will generate less traffic than essentially any other development that can be put on this property. From a traffic perspective, it's my opinion that driveway location, impact and traffic, that this development here is the best you're going to get with respect to traffic impact.
That concludes your testimony on that.
So that was like,
Okay, that was concise.
Number 12.
So any questions from the board?
I have a question. This has to do with the reduction in parking. Can you just briefly again identify why you reduced the number of parking spaces in that you're providing now?
Yeah, sure. Last plan included, I believe, was 18 parking spaces. You heard testimony from an expert in the field who, based on his experience, found that approximately 8 or 9 parking spaces would be sufficient for a location of this size, facility of this size. My testimony last time was with respect to reviewing the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation, as well as a document called the Subdivision and Site Plan Handbook. Both of those references calculated a parking demand for a facility the size of about 6 spaces. So, from the data available that I had, it says 6 spaces would be enough. I believe the expert said that 8 or 9 would be enough. So when we proposed 18, we said, well, maybe that's a little too much. You have a lot of extra people on the site. Do you recall how many individual boxes are in that place? Yes. How many? 50? 254. 259. 259.
269.
And the requirement of the number of spaces, according to code, is 40?
In the 30s, I believe, code requirement. 269. Thank you.
I think it was the high 30s, so we're looking for a waiver to go from, it was originally high 30s to 18, and now it's back down to 9.
40 spaces.
40, okay. So 40 down to 18, and now we're down to 9. I think we're going to revisit that a little bit later. we may want to get back up to the 18, but that's something we're going to discuss.
So I think which was the original proposal, but from the testimony you heard, I think 18 is probably excessive, so I think that's why the concept of banking some spaces, which allows the, correct me if I'm wrong, it allows the municipality or the applicant to be the impetus for the construction of those extra spaces.
How many spaces are you banking right now?
It'll be 9, half of what's proposed.
I think some of the conversation was alluding to the fact that you might want a little bit more space for turning around the trailers and just give yourself more pavement to actually maneuver in that very tight spot.
Yeah,
so 18 spots would give you that buffer that you need. I don't think, we need to decide right this second, but I think I'd like to see the 18 back. But, I'm not bringing that to a vote right now. It's just a discussion between you and me. I'm not sure why we would want to go down to 9.
I have to, in real world, if somebody shows up at the facility, I would think they show up either with a box truck or with their SUV, or if they come with a car and a trailer, it's their room. It's their room. If somebody shows up with a car and they wall, where do they park? Where do somebody park with the SUV and the, where do they park?
The space you should utilize.
Listen,
The original
yeah,
plan had
in fairness to the applicant, they reduced the number of parking spaces based upon the input they received from our professionals. None of that's etched in stone. They came in with 18. You want 18? They started with 18. They'll give you 18. They think less is needed. If less is needed, then less is needed. But ultimately, that's your decision. There's nothing to argue about over. I think whatever you get in parking, if you want 18, then you get it.
So no matter the 9 versus 18 or the manner by which we create impervious substance, there could be 9 paved with asphalt, 9 with some permeable vegetative component, so turf block.
Any other questions from the board on this witness?
Well, my concern is with people that are bringing a U-Haul trailer in there. Most people can't really maneuver those very well. And I don't see how you would ever turn it around or be able to back it in.
We have the ability to make essentially a K-turn. And as I said, I mean, you're going to have, this site is going to be very sleepy. I mean, you're going to have 2, 3, visitors at a time. You have the refuse area. So you could pull into the site, come down the drive aisle, and kick in reverse to back up your vehicle into the refuse site to use that as your loading position.
If it's just a straight vehicle, but if you're pulling a trailer behind you, that combined, that's what, 25 feet of a car and a trailer like that?
I haven't looked at that maneuverability, but in reality, many people are not able to do a proper trailer behind the car. I don't see it happening.
I think a suggestion that we continue this discussion later on in the testimony when we hear everything and move on. I think this is not a dead issue yet. We'll talk about it later. If that's okay with everybody, we'll move it on. If there's no other questions from the board, we'll go to public comments on this expert.
Or questions.
Questions, yes, questions on this expert.
I'd like to ask you now, coming out of Baltimore Street there, Larkin Building Development right behind your property and off on the Piazza track. Baltimore Street, I don't know whether entrances and exits to Larkin's development will be going on the Baltimore Street. You have a right-hand turn traffic coming out of there, variant but increased. You got a right-hand curve, which is cars are going right. You have a second left-hand turn lane, which is already on a crown growth, which goes like that, which makes that very difficult to get over into the side where you're supposed to turn. Then you've got the right-hand turn coming out, the right-hand turn going in. You've got oncoming traffic out of Stryker Road. You've got the potential of increasing population flow and car flow. And then you've got the Larkin Stryker's crossing entrance there. All right. Then you've got the Larkin entrance and exit up further on their retail development there. So you've got and then on Baltimore you've got exits from the nursery school and the medical plaza, all potentially increasing flows. Now, has that been looked at, the potential of increased flows, future flows? Has that been looked at all?
Sounds to me that there may be an issue with Baltimore and the Larkin driveways and all the off-site driveways associated with this property. This property is going to generate a fraction of any of those other driveways that are located along Stryker. Those retail driveways, an absolute fraction, a negligible amount of traffic is imperceptible on a normal day.
Could the plans be changed to make a right-hand turn in only and a right-hand turn out only with no left-hand turn, which should barricade that coming up curve turn to the left?
I'm just going to jump in. I had a meeting with the police chief out there and we discussed the right in, right out driveway versus other driveways. And the police chief was not amenable to a right in, right out. Felt that was going to present other hazards in the area, namely that people that would be approaching this particular driveway, when they realized they couldn't make a left-hand turn, would go and potentially make U-turn movements or go onto private property to do turnarounds, and it's just an undesirable thing.
My God.
So he felt the best thing to do was to prohibit a left going out, but to permit the left-hand turn going in.
Yes, and they could also possibly, you're right, to also possibly cut down to the school and come that way, yeah.
So I did meet with the chief. The chief also shared accident information. There's been two accidents at the intersection of Baltimore Street and Strikers Road. They were both wet weather related. So nothing out of the ordinary there.
Okay, Paul, just looking to the future, remember that all that might have to be altered in the future to increase that as well. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you very much.
John, just a few questions that we may use. Is that marked as an exhibit? Just want to make sure is it A3, is that right?
That's A3.
Okay. Yeah. So if someone were to come in with a box truck or with an SUV and a trailer, the applicant's desired location for them would be in the loading zone or across the front of the property?
No, you would hope they would be in the loading zone.
Okay, so if someone pulls in forward into the loading zone, how are they getting out?
They could reverse their vehicle, use the drive aisles, make a turn and head towards the straight road.
Do the turning radii submitted contemplate that and show that there's enough room for that to happen?
I have not seen this turning radii.
Okay, and is there any turning radii to a trailer behind any vehicle at all? Now, when someone is reversing out of the loading zone, even if they're to make a K-turn in front of the building, how much room is there? Let's say we have the busiest day of the year and we've got hot dog, 3 cars at one time. Is there enough queuing room so that anyone trying to get in while that trailer's reversing are not extended out into the street?
We have a pretty long throat on this driveway, and now pop it right into the drive aisle.
If someone's reversing there, are they even able to get to the drive aisle, or are they in the driving range, the entranceway?
I'm not sure I understand.
You've got someone reversing out of here. You testified that they would come into the driveway by the parking spots. Right. So they come this way. So if they're here, is there enough room here for people to wait?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, the parking space is 18 feet deep, so if we're looking at, just using that as a scale, I mean, you're looking at 3 to 4 cars in the driveway. And it reaches the street.
What's the max length on the box truck?
The box truck that the facility's going to use is, I think they testified to a 10-foot box truck. I was going to say, it has to be the box is the 10. I was going to say, it seems kind of short. The 19-foot straight truck.
Okay. And if someone were to pull in with a truck or a trailer in front of the parking spaces, do the turning radii determine whether they can turn around without interfering with parking spaces, or does the turning radii include them cutting off parking spaces? Meaning, if there's a car there, they won't be able to turn around.
I don't know if I understand that question, but I think we're talking about a very hypothetical situation where there's multiple confluence of larger vehicles on site.
Let me simplify the question.
Where my testimony is that there's probably only 2 vehicles entering over the course of an hour.
Let me simplify the question. If someone has a box truck or a car with a trailer, and they are in what we'll call the drive lane where the parking spaces are, do the turning radii for them to turn around, does that contemplate them nicking or going into parking spaces, or can they turn around without touching parking spaces?
I haven't run that template, but I'm just assuming they would be able to make a turn into the... If a garbage truck is able to navigate the site based on the templates provided, it is very likely that SUVs, obvious SUVs, but larger vehicles can also navigate the site.
Is there anything preventing box trucks, garbage trucks, whomever, from coming across the parking space area, or are they free to do so? Or are they limited to the loading zone? Or
I mean, physically, there's nothing preventing anyone from doing anything.
Any signage or anything that says, no box trucks in parking
Well, if a box truck fits in a parking space, then you can certainly use a parking space.
Well, how big are the parking spaces?
18 feet deep.
So a 19-foot truck would stick out the back then, even if it's up against the front.
Correct.
Or the rear would hang over the bump stop, the curb stop, and back into the space.
But so then it would be over the sidewalk. Does that create ADA issues?
Well, the only concern with an overhang of a parking space is the ability to get out of the parking space.
I'm sorry.
If you have a 24-foot aisle and you have a 19-foot truck, and there are cars, if this is not used because they're banked, a vehicle's wheels can go to that curb line, overhang that grass area.
Well, let's talk about the parking spaces up against the building side.
Right.
Is this a sidewalk here?
Yes.
So if someone were to back in and overhang, would they overhang on the sidewalk?
If they were to park that way. However, I don't have a concern if there's an extra foot in the 24-foot drive aisle, because there's sufficient room for cars to get by in a 23-foot drive aisle.
Are you requesting a waiver in this location, 25-foot drive aisle?
Yeah, it's not needed. You need a 25-foot drive aisle for two cars coming out of like in a shopping plaza. So if you're parking back to back, you got to make sure you're able to get out of a parking space. In this instance, with banked parking, there's no vehicle behind you. It's grass. It's a curb. Your wheels can go to that curb, and you're not having a car. You have plenty of room to navigate that drive aisle. You don't need the full 24 feet to do that if there's no cars behind you.
Does it impact other cars being able to pass through the drive aisle?
No.
Or turn around in the drive aisle?
No, if you have 23 feet, I mean, lanes on highways are like, so if you have a two-row lane, that's 22 feet. 3 feet here, fire lane, that's good.
State highways are 12 feet.
But not all.
State highways, in New Jersey they are.
Not all.
State highways.
Yes, that's what's required now.
Now, just traffic or circulation as well? Vehicle, okay. Now, I don't know if you know this, but back behind the Larkin building to the north, there's a fire lane. Is there any reason this building, that's a one-story building, is there any reason this building, a four-story building, wouldn't need something like that?
I can't answer that question. I wouldn't know. There's a lot of discussion of the fire official what he needs. I don't know what he needs.
What kind of vehicles can get from the front of the building to the back of the building using only this property? Can you get a car back there? Can you get a truck back there? Can you get a fire truck back there, if need be?
I would say no. I mean, it looks like there's 10-foot grass strip. You could drive a car on a 10-foot grass strip. I don't know who's doing that. Why would you do that?
Just with that in mind, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah,
What happens if there's any issue with the base and after the building is built? Just saying, if there's any, I don't know if there can be any, but if there's any issues behind the building after the building is built, how do you get there? Or if there's any issues with the building itself in the back, how do you get there?
I don't know that question.
Who knows?
So, changing topics slightly, with the parking spaces, the 9 that are there, not the 9 that are planned, will there be any wheel stop, or is it possible that there's overhang onto the sidewalk?
Looking at the plan, there is no proposed wheel stops, so there'll be an overhang on the sidewalk.
And does that create
A car could physically, my car can't. That's the sidewalk.
the box truck might be able to, does that create ADA issues with the sidewalk?
I don't have the width of the sidewalk here, so.
Sidewalk's 6 feet wide. I can tell you if it did, we've got a comment, George and I, on the plans. Perfectly acceptable to have a couple feet of overhang from a truck or a vehicle over a sidewalk, as long as the sidewalk is 6 feet wide or greater. So it's still going to leave 4 feet for pedestrian to walk by the truck.
Okay, so that's built in already.
Yes, that's correct. I think that issue's fine.
Okay, I think that's all we have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have one question that kind of built on what the attorney says. You're going to have a box truck available for tenants?
That's the intent.
and it's going to be parked in front of that dumpster most of the time, right?
That's what I understand.
So that space is really not going to be available for turning. And it will be- That's not the-
All right, so we're going the other far end of the
I'm
building.
sorry, yeah, you're right, the truck that they're providing will use the space.
Yeah.
It's a smaller truck than I think was originally.
Yeah, so we were all talking about
Sorry about that.
moving in and out of that, and that won't be available most of the
No,
time.
the truck will fit the park.
And in fairness to Doug, I understand that our engineer addressed the issue regarding access to the rear of the building last month's meeting testified. And because that's an issue that, he still appeared to garner some interest, if I could ask the Mr. clarify.
That comment was raised actually in Mr. Sturgeon's report, his initial report. And at the last meeting, the space between the building and the property line is 10 feet wide. The basin in the back is relatively small. Once it's constructed, as far as maintenance vehicles, pickup truck, if it had to get back there, but the landscape equipment and so forth would certainly go down this 10-foot strip along the southern portion. And we were also, although this plan doesn't show it, moving vegetation out of the way so that would provide access.
So you're saying a pickup truck could go?
Yes.
I mean, that was your question, right? Could a vehicle? Yeah, it can.
And should they need to get back there with a backhoe or something like that, backhoe could certainly be offloaded in the parking lot and traverse back there, and temporarily they could put down temporary mats to stabilize the ground so that they can drive over the grass without creating any ruts and get rid of the site.
With your comment there, the Lopatcong Fire Department does have what we call a Zach truck that would, all-wheel drive, that will be capable of going down that 10-foot right away, or 10-foot clearance down the side. We wouldn't get our big trucks in there, but our small truck would fit in there.
Can I ask, the plans appear to show at least one tree there.
Yeah. And we carry chainsaws on the truck.
I'm not going to make this witness to testify.
Is there any other questions from this? Yes, come on up.
Would you mind if I just took a look at that? Just a couple of questions. So if you had to go back to 18 spaces, because I think you said you didn't need the 24 or 25 foot, get the word, drive-through or whatever, because you only have 9 spaces and you don't have cars back. But if you went back to 18 spaces, you would then need that width of space?
25 feet high.
Is that right?
No, we're asking for 24, which is...
Right, but no, you're asking for 24 on the basis that there's only 9 spaces, right?
No. 24 is not dependent on whether it's 9 or 18. It's 24 is acceptable for that part of it.
So it wouldn't have any effect if you had to put the 9 other spaces?
No, I wouldn't go less than 20.
Okay.
For parking on each side of the aisle.
Okay. So then this your testimony was about this, this was traffic?
Vehicles, correct.
Okay. And so how did you do this study? Did you do a study, or what did you do here to come up with this?
There's reference material provided by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. We created a reference material called trip generation, and they study land uses across the United States. And they, engineers submit data, and then it's tabulated, grind it out, and rates and equations and regression equations are created to estimate traffic associated with different land uses based on their size.
So there's nothing actually done to look at the traffic on Stryker Road to come up with this exhibit?
No, that has nothing to do with the traffic on Stryker Road. That is an estimate of the traffic will be generated by the facility that's proposed and 2 facilities that could be proposed on this property without variances.
And without variances.
Correct.
So the 2 facilities that would are.
I'm sorry. I just want to clarify, was permitted use.
Right, so the 2 others that are used for comparison would be much smaller facilities?
Square footage, but not in traffic.
Yeah, and I'm trying to understand how do you reach that conclusion? if you build something on there that fits within the permitted use, you're saying there's going to be more traffic than, and I'm trying to understand how. What is the basis?
Because by nature, a self-storage facility does not experience a lot of traffic. If you go to an extra one's on 22 or anywhere else, there's nobody there. It's a very low generator. If you were to put a car wash, a convenience market of 900 square feet on here, you're going to see tenfold the traffic of what self-storage facilities. I mean, just the nature of the use that could be on the site.
But what about the size of the vehicles going in and out of it?
You have delivery vehicles with the retail component, and you have trash and less deliveries with an office component, but you have large vehicles from time to time.
And you wouldn't have trucks with trailers or U-Hauls or things like that going in there, trying to make a left-hand turn on the stretch of it.
Now, if you offer coffee or morning type items, then you have landscaping vehicles, people shopping at retail facilities. So you could have those type of vehicles, yes.
But you wouldn't have a building that came up as close to the edge of the street.
Oh, you may.
If you had a smaller facility.
Oh, you may.
And how would that happen?
I mean, I don't know personally the requirements for setbacks from the roadway and whatnot, but I mean, you could have the building right there. You could have an office building using that footprint, right where it's located now.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify. I'll wait till you're done if you want.
No, I'm just trying to understand. So you did no actual study of the traffic.
Well, that's not true. At the last hearing, I testified that we took traffic counts. So I do know the volumes. That table
has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with.
Correct. Those are projections for traffic for land uses that could be put on this property.
Okay.
Doug, just get down in the weeds a little bit with respect to IPE, the basis for that data and its reliance as a standard in the industry for traffic and engineering professionals.
Yes. I mean, traffic engineers are vital with respect to protecting traffic for land uses and performing traffic impact analysis.
It wasn't a resource that you sort of cherry picked.
Oh, no. I mean, it is ubiquitous among traffic engineers.
Can I ask a question just for my own benefit? Somebody ever compare real world things to the book?
Yes, of course. I mean, the books recommend that if you have available data, use that data. But many times, I can't go find
how accurate is your book?
Depends on the use. Generally, I think it's from day to day. It depends what road you're located on, what neighborhood you're in, a gas station, how high are gas prices. There's always variables that are going to change it. It's not exact, but when something doesn't exist, you have to make a projection. It's a projection of traffic based on data collected by engineers across the United States.
Right, because take into account this building is projected to have 269 units. We don't know how many are going to be full or not. If it's at full capacity, it's not clear to me, based on the study, whether the ones that are being looked at in the study have the same number of units, whether they're all at full capacity. You're saying there's another storage unit on Route 22 or wherever it is there's no traffic, maybe nobody uses it. In which case, why another one is necessary is beyond me, but that's a separate issue. But, if nobody's using it, then yeah, there's not going to be any traffic.
This is based on square footage. So this facility, we're 3 times as larger. We generate 3 times as much traffic as shown on that table.
But no, you could have 3 times the square footage and have fewer units. If you have bigger units, right, you could have the same building and have 20 units, 30 units.
That's true, but that's a great question with respect to if you have any practical or real-world data. You heard testimony at the last hearing where my projections are actually higher than what a specialist in the field said would occur at this facility. I believe I was saying 4 vehicles in peak hour. I think he was saying 1 or 2 cars in an hour. So, I'm doubling his traffic to 1 car every 15 minutes visiting the site. I mean, I can't overstate enough how little traffic is going to be generated on this property.
I would assume that in the beginning the traffic is much higher than it is going to be halfway down the road. The building opens up, it's going to be advertised. Okay. People he wants to have his spaces filled. They're not going to have these numbers in the first half year.
Okay.
It's going to be much higher because people are going to start renting the space, getting in and out.
That's true, but I mean, during Christmas time, malls are busy. You don't study, the one time that the mall's busy during Christmas. We do our analyses for a general condition over the course of the year.
So from what I learned from the gentleman who wants to, it seems to be fairly seasonal as well, right? He was speaking about it's very small storage. It's not like the ones we have with the garage things. He's talking about bringing your Christmas ornaments in there or your snowboard equipment. So I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I assume that the first half year is going to be much higher than what this is.
It very well may, but I don't look at it.
I just want to ask one question, maybe puts this in perspective. Of all the uses that are permitted in this zone, is there any permitted use that generates less traffic, that will generate less traffic than this use?
I don't know of any. It's near impossible to have less traffic than what this is generating. I mean, this is as low as a generating use as you possibly get.
Any other questions for this witness from the public or board members, for that matter, too? I think. Do you have any other witnesses?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Snyder can wait two meetings.
We almost bumped him in the batting order right there, so I don't know if we get back to it. I'm going to call up Mr. Snyder, a professional planner. If I can just, I don't think, was he sworn last month or no?
Yes, no.
They're all sworn.
Okay.
Yes. Could you provide the board and a summary of your education, your professional licensure, history of testimony for boards such as this?
I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, and I'm a charter member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Natural Resources and a Master's in City and Regional Planning. I've been in planning practice for a little over 40 years. I am the Northwest Area Representative for the New Jersey chapter of the American Planning Association. I'm a board member of New Jersey Planning Officials and have been so for about 30 years. I have testified in hundreds of boards, many of which in Warren County. I have represented boards. I have run my own court company for 35 years, testifying in matters such as this.
So I'm assuming this is going to be accepted as an expert witness.
And he's not. We have a problem.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, thank you. Proceed. So I'd like to begin with some facts that you've heard in the testimony so far. You've heard that this property has been for sale, actively for sale, for at least 8 years. You've seen, based on the plans that have been submitted, exhibits and so on, that this property is of an odd shape. It is, in fact, a property which is less than the required area. The zone requires 2 acres. This is 0.91 acres, so a little less than half the size. We've also heard that this proposal is the minimum size to make it economically feasible. This is not something that is overblown. It's not something that has a lot of slop to it. Spent a lot of time trying to design this property and this proposal so that it would fit the site. You heard Mr. Angelari testify at the last meeting that there have been a number of ideas for the site, none of which played out or permitted uses. You heard just now that this proposed use has an extraordinarily small traffic impact, has a very low intensity, if you will. Yes, we do require some waivers and variances, but it's next to impossible to suggest that any kind of use that made any kind of sense would not. So we can argue the variances and waivers from 2 perspectives. You've all heard these arguments before. They come under Section C1 of New Jersey Statutes 4055D70. And they also come under Section C2. In the first case, it's hardship. The applicants have demonstrated through their testimony that this lot, because of its peculiar size and shape, has been extraordinarily difficult to do anything with. There is a hardship that is attendant to the size and shape of this property. There's no arguing about it. All the testimony that you've heard so far indicates that that's the truth. There's really not much you could do We had an exhibit that we were showing, and if you'll excuse me, I'll pull it out of the folder. I don't see an exhibit number on this. This is an exhibit that was prepared by Mr. Decker, indicating what you could do where you wouldn't need all these variances and what have you. Just looking at it, it's pretty clear that it's a very small building, which really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. We're not here to argue that you should be able to build anything you want, but we're here to argue that you should be able to build something that's economically feasible so as the property not being zoned into a utility. Right? Applicants entitled to some reasonable use of the property. Zone standards generally are arrived at with a look at the neighborhood. Certainly standards such as the height, and this is something that we'll get into as well, are often entered into with reference to fire equipment so that the fire company can get onto the roof, so that adequate access is available. You've heard that our building meets the height requirement. It's less than the maximum permitted. And you've also heard that the building is 4 stories where only 3 are permitted. You've heard that unless the 4th story goes in, this project doesn't make any sense. And you've heard that we took into account the concern with regard to 3 stories, because the number of stories in a building typically is a function of a concern of 2 things. First is the intensity of use, and the second is sort of a busyness perspective, if you will. We've designed this building with a mansard roof, and I forget who said it, but you would require X-ray vision to be able to see that there's a 4th story because the mansard roof covers that 4th story. So you have a building that is consistent with the height that would otherwise be permitted in a zone that looks, for all intents and purposes, like a 3-story building. There's no intensity impact here because the use itself is of a lower intensity with those 4 stories than anything else you could possibly build. Testimony from our transportation engineer here, backed up by the professional who testified, Mr. Montfort, at the last meeting, indicates that the traffic we would expect is used to generate, notwithstanding your concern about when it just opens. In fact, the traffic would be almost impossible to count. We've also listened to concerns that were raised by members of the public and the board with regard to access to the property. We talked about the right in, right out, left in, and avoiding the left out. We've taken into account the concerns and consulted your safety experts and your township engineer. And so, what we've done with regard specifically to the height, we have disguised it. We have made it such that it's consistent in terms of height itself with other buildings in the area. Now, I haven't done any analysis of the apartments in the rear, but they look fairly tall to me, so I'm not sure that this is the tallest building in the neighborhood, but perhaps that can come out later with somebody else. But long story short, dealing with the number of stories of this building, you won't be able to tell that they're there. The number of stories does not materially contribute to the intensity of this use. If you're going to go from 4 trips in an hour, and you're going to cut that by 3/4, that really has no impact. So a 3-story building, 4-story building, your traffic impact is going to be, for all intents and purposes, exactly the same. So there is no substantial or any kind of negative impact that would be caused by 4 stories in this building. Okay, so let's talk about the other variances that we need. We need buffering variances, we need side yard variances, and they are also a function of the size and shape of this lot. if this lot were a nice regular 2-acre lot, we could very easily meet side yard, we could provide you with 25-foot buffers, we could do all those things. We can provide you with plantings in the parking lot, because that's what your standards are based on. A standard lot. This is not a standard lot. There's no land available to cure that. What we've done is we have designed this project so as to minimize impact on the neighbors. We have designed it, and in fact, due to input from your planner, to retain as much of the tree line as is humanly possible on the north side of the property, and to, of course, take advantage of the existing shrub line on the south side of the property, between our property and the strip mall. So that question becomes, why would you really need a lot of buffering between commercial uses in the first place? Well, you might need it because there's a lot of coming and going, there's a lot of lighting, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of activity. And maybe the adjacent commercial use is one where quiet is something that they would really like to have. Well, again, on this property, there isn't a lot of noise. There's not a lot of coming and going. There's not a lot of activity. There'll be some security lighting, but not a heck of a lot. It's not open 24/7. It has defined business hours. And so the need for buffering becomes much less. Additionally, from a practical standpoint, how are you going to buffer a 45-foot building that sits relatively high in the landscape next to buildings that are in the case of the daycare center, somewhat lower? You're going to see it. The point is, the town's ordinance says that's okay. You can have a 45-foot building next to this daycare center. That's your code. We're not asking you to do something that your code wouldn't allow us to do anyway. Because remember, the only height issue is the number of stories. The only issue with regard to buffering and what have you is levels of activity. We've talked about the levels of activity that are negative. So here again, yes, we need these variances. Yes, they are specifically a function of the size and shape of the lot. No, they are not necessary. No, they will not cause any significant negative impact, because they're pretty much consistent with what's in the area. So, I said earlier that we could also talk about these variances under Section 6, which is the balance of tax. Perhaps the purposes of planning would be advanced by this proposal, and that any negatives are outweighed by the positives. You've all heard these arguments before as well. This is the Highland Center. Your master plan, which was revised in, I believe, 2011. Let me make sure I got the date right. No, excuse me, 2013. Specifically incorporated the Highlands criteria. As you know, the Highlands is a fairly restricted regimen and looks to focus development within existing community centers. As you probably also are aware, the state planning effort, which began back in the 90s, also looks to create centers of place. Smart growth is a topic that undoubtedly you've heard. It talks about things like avoidance of sprawl. Well, you've also heard that this is a third-generation facility. This is not one of those facilities that's spread out over any number of acres on little one-story buildings. This is concentrated. The density is the same in terms of number of units, but it occupies a much lesser space. Therefore, it has a much lesser impact on the land, on the community as a whole. We reduce the amount of impervious coverage enormously by going to 4 stories instead of just the one, which you can see like the one out on 22. We reduced impervious coverage. You don't need anything like the driveways, access ways, and so forth to serve one of those spread out, sprawling developments. It's also a facility that is climate controlled, and as such, provides services not otherwise available for most of the units in the area. You all heard that this area is generally underserved, according to the expert who testified last month. And that was not even in taking into account proposals for 250 new units out by the mall, and however many units are going to be built behind this property, and how many other units that were not counted in his analysis. The long story short, there is a need for this. This is an excellent location in terms of proximity to a substantial housing development, as you obviously know. So what else? Land use law talks about putting things in appropriate locations at appropriate densities. Sidewalks connect this development with a strip center and the apartment complex. People could actually walk to get their Christmas stuff if they wanted. They could walk to get their bicycles or whatever it is that they can't do. So again, locating this facility here actually reduces traffic that you might otherwise find on Baltimore or Strikers, for that matter, because you could actually walk there. Your master plan also talks about pursuing center designation. You already did that. But the goals and objectives and policies and so forth of the Highland Center, which was a special district, which was to promote and encourage appropriate growth and development, compatible with the existing community character. That's a quote out of the master plan. We suggest this is exactly what this is. To encourage development of underutilized properties within the town center. To provide for concentrated development within the community core. All of these things are objectives that you have said in your documents that you want to see happen. This proposal makes those things happen. Remembering the fact that other things that your zoning ordinance otherwise permits don't work. That this is the one thing in the last 8 years that's made any kind of sense that's gotten to this level. So, to continue, we're talking tonight, as a matter of fact, about using impervious materials and so forth, and minimization of impervious surfaces. Here again, if we were to try to develop this property for one of the other permitted uses in the zone, we'd be looking for serious variances because we would be covering a lot more building and a lot more parking. A lot more building and a lot more parking mean a lot more drainage issues. More drainage, more building, more parking equals much greater impact on the environment, much greater impact on the resources that you have indicated are concerns to you and that need to be taken care of. Seeking to protect, preserve, restore, enhance the natural resources of the Highlands area. Again, out of your master plan. Encouraging the use of smart growth principles in locations of the area deemed appropriate for development and or redevelopment. Our proposal clearly meets and advances the purposes of planning. Our proposal has negligible impact. No substantial negative impact, negligible impact, any way you look at it. Remembering the fact that you can have a 45-foot tall building in the zone. Remembering the fact that we designed this building such that you don't know it's 4 stories. That's my testimony.
All right, thank you. We're going to start with questions from the board. I have a couple of questions real quick, the things that just caught up. You had mentioned, we heard about the 4th story making this economical. economically feasible. The third story was basically the break even. The fourth story is what you needed to make it worth it. Now, what I haven't heard before was saying that the 31,000 square feet is the minimum size that's economically feasible. So are you suggesting that a 27,000 square foot 4-story storage facility would not be economically feasible?
I'm simply building on the testimony that my client offered at the last meeting.
I have not heard.
He's here.
I don't remember that one.
He's here tonight and will clarify that for you.
I think Mr. Pershing will touch on those issues when he asks the question.
Okay, and my second question is just to kind of correct something I believe that you were implying. You said there's no negative impact to a 4th story, absolutely none. But what you're not taking into account is that 4th story adds square footage, and square footage does have an impact. So I just wanted to, I think I knew what you were saying, but I just wanted to clarify that it's the square footage that has the impact, which the 4th story contributes to, but the 4th story by itself is what you meant when you said it didn't have an impact.
Well, no, I said it has negligible impact, and is very difficult to measure between 3 and 4 stories. If you look at the parking lot, it would be the same. If you look at the drainage, it would be the same. If you look at lighting, it would be the same. If you look at the height, it would be the same. So the difference between 3 and 4, I don't know how you measure that unless you were able to tell by a design that let you know that there was something different about this building that was somehow more intense than what your municipal documents suggest was appropriate. And that's why we designed it, so that you can't tell that.
And you do not have a waiver for impervious surface, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Those are my questions. I'm sure there's more.
I'm sure.
Tony, can I ask you a question? Sure. The testimony raised, in my mind, some questions that we are somewhat obligated because somebody bought a property which is some crazy shape and tried to do something with it over a period of time, and it didn't happen, that we somehow have to be, I don't know what the word is, getting along with all these requested waivers because they tried, didn't work, but it would work if we would grant all these waivers, and therefore we are kind of obligated to?
Not obligated. I think the testimony is that property owner, it's an accurate statement of law, is entitled to the reasonable use of their property. And I think the point that Mr. Snyder was trying to make and other witnesses were trying to make, if you look at that drawing, what sheet is that of the Van Clean plans?
This is a separate sheet? You might want to mark that as an exhibit.
Thank you. I don't wish to testify for Mr. Snyder, but to answer your question, I think the point here is that in theory, someone could come up with a conforming design that meets all the ordinance requirements. But if you look at the size of the building and what it could be used for, judge for yourself if that's economically feasible, if it's viable, if it makes any sense for anyone to invest the money for the approval process, for the site work, for the construction, for it.
Now, with that said, if I buy a piece of property, commercial piece of property, I know when I buy it, I should know what I can do with it based on the dimensions and the size. It is my opinion. I should know if I buy this property, I cannot put these things on it because it just doesn't fit. So, from our perspective as a board, is that something which needs to be taken into consideration? And what does it mean, reasonable expectation of use? What does that mean, reasonable? I don't know what that means.
I think I'll let Mr. Snyder answer that question because he's the planning expert. If someone had owned a larger piece of property and this was subdivided off and they left themselves with this, that would be called a self-created hardship.
Okay.
That's a different issue. But this is not that. This was a standalone lot that someone acquired and is trying to develop it.
So what does reasonable mean? Reasonable,
again, you say that if you were to buy a piece of land, that you would know what you could get on it. This property apparently existed either before the ordinance was put together requiring 2 acres, or in fact it was created after that, in which case any variances or what have you would have been granted by your predecessor board as part of subdivision. I don't know what its history is. But the fact is this. This is, for all intents and purposes, a freestanding, isolated lot. There isn't any land available on either side to make it better because both properties on either side are now developed. Owning property comes with the idea, under zoning, that some use, some reasonable use, can be made of property. Now you can go way off and say, well, you bought yourself a cliff. Nobody in their right mind could possibly build on this thing you're acting on. This is a nice, relatively flat piece of land. It's on a significant roadway in the township. There's no reason to believe that you couldn't build something. And so you look at the economics. Somebody owned this land since it exists, this lot. Okay? Somebody has owned it. The fact that other people have bought it doesn't mean that they've created their own problem. Okay? If they had subdivided this thing into too small a piece so that you really couldn't do anything with it, well, that's too bad. That's self-created hardship. This is a piece of land that comes with the expectation of use. You've heard expert testimony. Our client is a well-known, well-regarded developer, a lot of experience in this, and he has told you under oath, on the record, that this is the only thing that's made any kind of sense in 8 years. I think that's a reasonable period of time to try this, try that. You heard Mr. Angelari testify at the last meeting that there have been a number of proposals, none of which worked. This is the first one.
For various reasons.
For various reasons. They didn't work economically. They didn't make any sense. And economics is part of this. I mean, whether we like it or not, some use of this property makes some sense. Infill is one of those things that happens in town centers. Leftover pieces that, for whatever reason, were split off from others. We don't know what the reasons may have been. But good planning practice, state policy, Highlands policy, encourages infill. Municipal policy, good planning practice, encourages infill. That's what this is. You have a town center here. Things are a little bit more crowded in town centers. They're not open spaces and so on. I understand that, that there's a provision for open space in a parking lot, and that's kind of an interesting way of putting it. But by the same token, we're talking providing a service that is needed in the area. That's already been testified to. We're talking about providing it without having a significant impact on the neighbors. Yeah, that's going to be tall. But that's what your code permits. I can't get away from that. If your code said 35 feet and we're going for 45, then you got an issue there.
I'm not worried about the height.
But other than that, the side yards and so forth, the buffering are minor in this context, in a town center. Because you'll recall too, in town centers you've got buildings right next to each other. Here they're separated. If you look at setbacks, for example, the actual setback between buildings, which is your provision of adequate light, air, and open space, if I looked at this and 20 scale, it's got to be 8 inches. There's 160, no, use the right one.
There's 100 feet between buildings at the closest corners of what we're proposing and the next door neighbor. And here, there's probably 90 feet, close to that, the other way. Your side yard setbacks, 50 feet or 100 feet, would fit into that. So there's enough space between, again, according to your code. So, light air and open space. A useful service that directly works to the benefit of the people who already live in the neighborhood or will live in the neighborhood. As we had testimony before about people who are downsizing, people my age who are getting out of houses and into smaller spaces. Have to get rid of stuff, have to store some stuff, that kind of thing. It's a community asset. And it's climate control. And it's not open 24/7. That's a pretty good deal.
Hi, Mason. Can I ask a few questions?
Absolutely.
Yes. You could have gotten just for C1, you're testifying about C1 and C2. You said some things I really don't follow or agree with. You were talking about walking. I don't know why you would walk there unless you push it in a wheelbarrow.
Right.
It's like your stuff in your pocket, or, you're either moving stuff in or taking it out. Right? No reason.
If I could answer that. I mean, one of the things that I have always suggested is important is providing options. Now, you're not going to have hordes of people walking to this facility. I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying that you could have somebody who wants to walk. I'm saying that the things that make a town center attractive are options. That I can do this or I can do that. It's my choice as opposed to my necessity. Because you're right. You're not going to have a whole bunch of people walking to the facility.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're getting close to 10, so let me try and get my questions out here. You said a lot of good stuff. I mean, I recognize it, all right? But to give this some shape, you have your negative criteria that you have to demonstrate for the C1, right? And the one is without causing substantial detriment to the public good. And so your basic argument is it has negligible impact. It fits in with the surrounding area and so on. There's no real negative impact to it. We're minimizing parking, minimizing impervious coverage, etc. Is that your testimony, myself?
Yes,
summarizing that correctly?
Yes, it is.
All right. The second part is it will not impair the intent and purpose of municipal zoning plan. And the second part of that is we've subscribed to the Highlands. We've been designated a Highland Center. Everything that this does is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Highland Center, right? And then under C2, obviously, it's needed for this particular piece of property. I don't really get the difference between C1 and C2 that much sometimes.
It used to be called the reasonable.
I know, flexible.
That's right.
So again, the variances advance the purpose of municipal land use law. Again, we go back to the Highlands and so on. And I'd like you to just touch on the last one, that the benefits outweigh the detriments. Can you summarize that for me real quick?
Yes. I'll do it in reverse order. There aren't any detriments. I don't see any detriment at all. I see an idle piece of property being put to use. I see a vacant gap in a center being filled with a productive use. I see opportunities for people to store their goods within reasonable distance of their home, as opposed to having to go out on Route 22. You heard the discussion earlier about access and so on and so forth. It'd be nice to have someplace right in your backyard. In terms of the purposes of planning, one of which is light air and open space, which we talked about earlier. We talked about smart growth and the focusing a development in areas such that you minimize the impact on the overall area and the overall resource. Highlands is particularly concerned with that issue.
I might suggest that concerns were raised about the mass of the building, the 4 floors. Your answer was it's within the height limitations of the existing ordinance. I get that. And there has been some concerns raised about simply the access and egress to the site. And I'm sure with the project, it'll be more difficult than without the project. So that's a detriment.
Well, it is only in the context of, all right, fine. We really don't want to see anything built on this property. Well, there's an answer to that. It doesn't fit real well with the local budget. So, and I'm not trying to be clever. I'm just saying it's something. Your zoning contemplates that there will be development on the property. Something goes there. Therefore, something has to gain access from Stryker's Road to get there. No, this is not the most perfect location for access to a piece of property. We can see that. We've reduced the number of traffic movements in and out of the property in response to those concerns that you quite rightly raised. The fact is that at some point, access remains something that we're entitled to as long as we do it as safely as is possible.
Okay. You answered me.
Thank you.
Further questions from any board members?
In the lighting plan, there was no discussion, I don't think, last month or tonight, lighting. Is there an ordinance requirement of glare, and are you going to meet that? The concern of residents or driving, passing by. The establishment is not a 24-hour site, but there will still be 24-hour
There'll be some
lighting,
security
right?
lighting. Yeah. And the lighting will be such that it complies with the code. There will be no fugitive light. There will be no hot spots.
And before we go to the questions from the public, any questions from the professionals?
I think basically what the applicant is asking the board, or what the board is having to consider, is a balancing test. You basically have a very odd-shaped lot, which basically does not fit well, obviously, within the current zoning in terms of shape and size and acreage. But what you have to look at is that it is a private piece of property that will or should be able to be developed for something consistent with our ordinance. This use happens to be one of the permitted uses in the district. This applicant is asking you to really balance and weigh, as compared to the other uses that are permitted in the district, if this is the best fit given the location of the site and the configuration of the site. And what I mean by that is does it address the potential negative impacts of developing this property as best as can be addressed? In other words, has the access been designed to properly access the site? Has the use been picked to reflect the difficulties of coming and going from the site, the intensity of use? And I think that's what he's trying to address to you. Yes, the building, he could put a smaller building on there that conforms to the use, but it may have more negative impacts. I think that's really what he's testified to. If you build a real small retail building, you may have more traffic impacts. You may have more issues in terms of circulation in and out of the site. One of the things that this use, I think, from the testimony that's been put forward here, it's probably the least impact in terms of traffic, in terms of bringing people on and off that site that you could get for this unusual property. And I think that's something that you have to balance. I mean, obviously, the other aspect of this that you can weigh is that this site, even though it's very small, the applicant has not exceeded the impervious cover that's allowed on the site or the building coverage. It's actually in proportion to the tract size. So in a sense, even though we may sit there and say, well, you know, look how big this building is, the point is that it still is falling within the intensities of the ordinance, given the smallness of the site, 9/10 of an
So there are aspects that you should weigh, and it's really a balancing test that you have to look at on the property, and it's one that I think deserves a lot of consideration, particularly in the sense that it will minimize the impacts of traffic, circulation, all of which I think we all know, including the applicant, are difficult given the configuration of the site. So that's all I'm saying. It is a balancing act. You've seen the testimony, and you really have to choose, but I think you're choosing between allowing something to happen. The bottom line is, as a private property, something should be permitted to be built there. Is this the best application that you could get at this stage? Is it the best fit for the very unusual conditions on this site? That's really what you're being asked to evaluate. That's really all I have to say on it at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the public from this witness?
Yes, but they may be extensive. Does it make more sense to hold it until the
If you can hold it, this is going to be our last witness for the night. And obviously you're going to hear all your witnesses next time. I want to give you the full time that you need to do it.
Frankly, I think I'd rather do it all at once.
Yes.
Okay,
So we're going to hold off on that. So if you want to hold off on your questions, will you be here at the next meeting?
Yes, yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. So. Yes, we are.
I'm sorry, one quick question.
Okay.
If they were to build a building that size, would the access point going into that lot be at the same spot?
Yeah. So there are public questions for this witness? Just want to make sure I don't
Is that a question for their planner or for their?
This is not public comment, so it's just for this, just for the planner.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I said yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer was yes on that one.
I didn't hear the answer.
One question. Mr. Snyder, if this building was built versus no building, because it wouldn't be economically feasible to build a 2,900 square foot office building or a 900 or 1,000 square foot mini mall or convenience store, would this building that we propose generate more tax rateables for the town with minimal impact versus nothing at all on the property or even a smaller building?
What I understand.
Sorry, if I may jump in. He's a professional planner, he's not a tax appraiser. And second of all, we're sure he's represented by counsel, I'll just note.
That's okay. Questions withdrawn. There's no further questions from the board. I have a quick one. This is to consider for the next meeting, to think about a little bit. I propose a hypothetical, and this is just for discussion. If you were to take a 10-foot swath off the width of that building, you would drop your building down by 12%. You would lose 4,000 square foot. You'd still have 4 stories. You wouldn't have to go for the waiver for 2 berths versus 1. Is something of 27,000 square feet still economically feasible? Something to think about, maybe, because I'll ask that at the next. Well, not to answer now, because I want you to think about it. Yeah, I want you to think about that. So if there's no further questions, then we gotta move on. There's a couple. We gotta wrap up the meeting real quick. I just have a couple things we gotta cover, just to go through the rest of the agenda. So.
John, are we okay time-wise on this?
Yes, sorry.
We just deemed it complete, so we're fine.
Yeah, we're fine. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I would ask the board to, if he could commit, to have some sense of who would be testifying on behalf of Mr. Gardner at the next hearing, in terms of his professionals, in terms of who we should make sure.
Well, I can say now that we'll have a representative of the company and planner, but after we review this testimony, there may be more. I'm not willing to put a cap on it.
Fair enough.
Thank you. So we're adjourned for the night?
No, we're not adjourned. You are, but the meeting is going to continue, so.
Okay.
And we still have to do the public comment for other agenda items.
This matter will be carried to the meeting of March 22nd. There'll be no further notice. So mark your own calendars accordingly. We've got an hour and 58 minutes left on your birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'll get after it hard in 2 hours.
Thank you.
Again, I ask everybody to please remain seated, or at least, if you're going to leave the premises, do it quietly. The meeting is not adjourned yet. So next item, real quick, we were going to discuss the RO Highlands, which we are not going to do. We're going to hold that off. But I talked to George about it, and what we need to do is we got to get a better focus on this, and we need to have our discussions. So what we're going to be doing, I talked to George, and this is special meetings with George only. We won't need the attorney, we won't need the engineer there. We're going to set up a special meeting for March 7th with a snow date of March 9th.
Doesn't snow anymore.
Yeah. And we are also going to set up a special meeting for April 6th, as April 5th is not available because that is a town council meeting. So we're setting up 2 special meetings in advance. Again, that's March 7th with a snow date of March 9th, and this is April 6th. And George has checked his schedule and confirmed that he's available. I hope this can accommodate most everybody. Our hands were pretty tied as far as George's schedule goes, so I didn't have any options. But we have to do this, and I talked to George about it and the importance of getting this done.
Usual time, Eric? 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock.
Thanks.
Yeah, 7 o'clock. The next we on the agenda was we have a correspondence for the I-78 Logistics Park. They wanted a 30-day review period for that, and we sent in a request for a 30-day extension. So we should, and Paul, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on what that was about.
Yeah, under the New Jersey Highway Access Code, when an applicant refers submission items that have been submitted to the DOT to municipalities and counties have 30 days to return comments to the DOT. But the DOT is shown a lot of flexibility in that regard, and Mr. Rashad, who testified in this matter before the board last year, has a lot of relationships at the DOT. He's a former DOT employee, so we contacted the access people, talked to them about getting some additional time for the township, and did submit a request for an additional 30 days, which would allow us to submit our comments sometime around the middle of April, I should say. So we're still waiting for a response from Mr. Doobie, but we do believe that's going to be granted to the township.
So this will show up on the agenda for the March meeting, I'm assuming, because we will need to talk about that, correct?
Yes, and I would think that the town council would also be looking at this at the meeting on March 1st next week.
Okay.
Are those comments submitted yet to the staff that we can come in and review them?
There are documents here that you can come and review here in the building. I got a complete package from the applicant directly in my office. We have not looked extensively at it right now. I think we need to get some direction from the governing body as to what the governing body wants us to do in a way of review. There's also money issues here. The applicant's escrow account right now appears to only have about $1,500 in it. So that's always a factor. Money is always a factor. So the question is, do we fit our review into what money remains in the escrow account? Do we go back to the applicant office and ask them to provide more money so that the township can do a more comprehensive review through its professionals? So these are all issues that have to be vetted out with the council next week.
Yeah, and, I question his willingness. I don't know if he really wants, because he really doesn't have an application before the board right now. He's got his general development plan review, and he has not submitted a site plan, so he's doesn't have an active application in front of the board.
Yeah, he filed these documents in response to a condition that was placed by the board in the resolution of approval for the general development plan in 2016. So he's met his obligation, and Joe is correct. It remains to be seen whether he would be flexible or amenable to providing the township some more money to be able to do a more comprehensive review. I mean, I think we should ask. Just not sure what the response would be at this point. He's been somewhat hard-nosed at times with the use of his escrow account. That's been the track record here.
The submittal was in reference to what? Was it traffic, or was it more?
We had to ask them as a condition that when they submit their application to DOT, and it's open to comment, we want to be aware of it so that we can view it and comment too. There's traffic at that intersection.
So what is my question is, what is their application?
Well, it's an access permit with planning.
Yes, it's an access permit.
Yeah.
It's a major access permit with
Right.
planning.
Okay.
And to me, the ongoing argument is he still wants to study just the two intersections.
I think you should do the corridor, at least up through 519.
So do most other people. And I think that's all the council's gonna be responding to. We're not gonna, that hasn't happened yet, but we're not gonna get involved.
I still like my left turn to the right lane.
Yeah.
Nobody else likes
Well, I shouldn't even say that. It depends on how the escrow. I mean, my initial focus has always been the study of the whole corridor versus the two intersections.
Joe, I completely agree, and my concern is that this is the opportunity that we have to suggest that, and we don't want this.
It's been suggested several times. It's probably going to be our next opportunity.
Our comment is go directly to DOT, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what we want.
And he needs that access into that property. He needs
That's
that
correct.
access
It's still
through Lou
It's still DOT's.
right? Yeah, and I get that, but it still needs access from our side. That's key for that whole development, quite honestly.
Yeah, and honestly, that not seeing the application, that was my biggest concern, is the corridor, and we want to see a little bit more of it. Why?
He's got a set of plans, and then he's got a traffic report. He says, he has his projection that says since he's not exceeding the existing volume by more than 10%, he doesn't have to study all these other intersections. And the way he makes that calculation is applying the footprint from 2 generations ago to the current traffic tables.
Now, he should have to do a count to get the existing conditions. He should have to count it.
That's not for us to say.
Well, I know, but that could be a comment that we make to DOT.
What he's saying, the existing conditions are, he's going to add to the existing conditions. There's no question. Whatever traffic is out there, I shouldn't be testifying, right? But it's going to increase, right? What I'm saying, though, is the existing condition is the Ingersoll Rand of 50 years ago applied to current traffic tables. Now, we had that discussion here, and there's also a concept in law and regulations. If you apply a right strictly and it produces ridiculous results, you shouldn't proceed down that path. I'm not an attorney. You've never read that, right? And I think that's what we got here, is where a rather strict interpretation of a reg is producing a ridiculous result.
I agree.
I said that before when Mayor Ellis was here. If you go down to exit 3, and you count every vehicle that's eastbound and westbound, until that section was open, all that traffic came down Memorial Park. So you better watch where you're going with your traffic studies.
And our last item is, I'm just going
to,
I'm going to sign the contracts for our professionals and remind everybody we do not have to sign the contract for under 5-year, in year 4, 3 or 4 of the 5-year contract. I can't remember. In year 4 of the 5-year contract, so I do not have to sign that one, but I will sign the 3, which we already agreed to at the January meeting. So I'll just do that.
Those numbers.
Not too many.
And I just want to respond to Eric. Like you said, zero, but I moved out here in 78, and there was no traffic on 78. All right, it came in 73. It dumped on exit 3. There was a gas station at the circle there. You could actually, if you pulled onto 78, there was a gas station in the middle.
I say, have my life, so you don't tell me about
That 2 things had to happen to generate the westbound traffic. Is one, it had to open this way, but it also had to open through the Union Watch-Up Reservation. And that happened much later. There was, I used to shoot down.
I have Watch-Up Reservation.
I was, some environmental thing.
It was the animal crossings for the animal.
So,
They are bridges, Dr. That's right.
so, right, there was no 78.
I see.
So it's now traffic.
I can't read it closer. Closer.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Public comment, we have one public, no comments, okay, motion to adjourn then.
Second.
All right, all in favor, let's go, all in favor, get out of here.